Excuse me. I'm going to call to order this work session of the Forest Grove City Council. The date is April 13th. The topic is Historic Downtown Design Standards and Guidelines. Just a reminder, no public comment will be taken and the council will take no formal action. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this work session is really intended to allow City Council an opportunity to comment on our historic guidelines and standards before we get started in this process. As Kim and Matt will take you through the presentation and also through the work session, we'll introduce the consultant, introduce kind of the scope of the project that's before us. But before we get started, if there was any kind of overarching kind of guardrails that the council may or may not have pertaining to this particular effort, we would love to hear from you about that. We had a previous work session kind of just explaining what historic design guidelines and standards were and the difference between standards and guidelines. We'll do a little bit of recapping about that. But other than that, thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to turn it over to Kim and Matt.
Cool. All right, thank you, Jesse. Council, Matt Johnson, Senior Planner, Robert Dortnack, next to me, Historic Architect. I'll give him a more formal, proper introduction here in a moment. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's what we'll be talking about today. We'll connect it to the Vision 2040 plan, describe our purpose, do a whole timeline creation from the district to where we are now, introduce Robert, give you another little bit of project background, because I know it's been about a year since we last talked about this. Scope of work, what Robert will be producing for us and how it will be applied, and then we'll invite your discussion. Okay, so within the Vision 2040 plan, the goal statement economy very much applies. The outcome to revitalize downtown and foster a community identity and sense of place. Actions that contributes to increased volume and diversity of commercial business development, encourage and attract more events downtown to promote foot traffic, and of course explore exterior and architectural design standards to create that visual identity. So our purpose again today is to discuss the process, our timing and expectations of the development of these standards and guidelines for our downtown historic district. Let's go ahead and get started on this timeline. And next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so this has been a long time in the making. So this all started in 2017 when City Council adopted the city's historic preservation plan. Part of that preservation plan was to explore the creation of a downtown district. The first steps in establishing that district were to identify and evaluate historic resources to our downtown. The city completed an updated historic survey, part of the original town plat, accompanied by a contextual statement that basically details all the character of Forest Grove. The consultant that was hired to prepare those updates was also directed to find out, what's the best boundaries for our district. 3 years later, City Council recommended the nomination of the district in early 2020, and then it was sent to the state and was officially recognized as a National Historic District in late October 2020. And then in 2023, Council officially adds the Downtown Historic District into our city's comprehensive plan. And just last year, around this time, staff secured a grant from the State Preservation Office, now Oregon Heritage, to create these standards and guidelines to accompany our National Historic District downtown. Shortly thereafter, we held the work session with Council and the HLB describing what this is. The winter, we found Robert, who will draft our standards and guidelines for the district. Slide, please. And so this is Mr. Dortney. This is Robert has a very long career. These are just a few things that are specifically applicable to the work that he's doing here in Forest Grove. He was the one that actually created the standards and guidelines for all three of our residential districts. I believe that's 2016, 2014. Time flies. So in addition to his work that he's done here specific in Forest Grove, he's also created design guidelines for Oregon City, their historic district. He's created infill guidelines for the city of Aurora, and he's worked with the city of Independence to combine their guidelines with the commercial and residential. As a conservator for the American Institute for Conservation, he prepared architectural condition reports for the Hoover Minthorn Historic Museum and property in Newburgh, and also for the Troutdale Historic Society properties. And lastly, he prepared preservation reports, projects, and consultations for Fort Dalles, the Salem Pioneer Cemetery, the Willamette Heritage Center, Jason Lee House, Deepwood State Squirrel Garden, and he's continuously involved with ongoing work for the Portland's Water Bureau, Washington Park Historic District, and Mount Tabor. Welcome, Robert.
Actually, for the residential guidelines, when I was on the State Advisory Committee for Historic Preservation, 2 terms, we had a field trip, and Michelle Dennis was working with you, or had worked on some of that at that time, the concrete houses and so forth. So that was a nice field trip way back when. I'm not sure the year that was. So it's good to be back. I enjoyed working with James on the residential state guidelines, and so happy to be back and help out.
Thank you.
All right. So where we are today and looking ahead. So Robert's scope of work includes reviewing all of those supporting documents from the creation of the historic district. So when that was nominated, all of those historic surveys and documents supporting that nomination is what he's using to create those standards and guidelines. And an initial draft of these historic standards and guidelines must be reviewed by the State Preservation Office before the end of the project's funding grant cycle. So by the end of July 2026. So the purpose of the state's review is to ensure that it meets the federal guidelines, the Department of Interior for rehabilitation standards. So things like preservation, rehabilitation, reconstruction, there's a fourth component there, but those basic federal guidelines on what your historic regulations need to be is what we need to have a very bare draft greenlit by the state. So we are working with Joyce Sears. She's the one coordinating our grant and our work. She's expecting a draft from us at the beginning of June to start that process. So once she confirms that the basic framework and the draft that we provide the state meets those federal requirements, excuse me, there's no timeline in the local adoption process. So the city can review, modify, refine it, subject to whatever timeline that we decide. So I just wanted to make that clear that getting this through the state is just getting it through the bare minimum of meeting the federal standards for preservation. How we tweak and refine that throughout the future, that's all up to us. All right, and then circling back, just kind of what we covered last summer. So again, what is a historic district, and what is the purpose of a historic district? So that its intent is to preserve and maintain the character of buildings just as they appear from the public. So what you see here is what could be regulated by those standards and guidelines. Nothing that is, or things that are not visible. So inside the building, sides of buildings or rears of buildings that aren't visible from public right-of-way. All of those are not subject to these standards and would just be held to regular city code or building code. So the difference between a standard and guideline. So the standards are the clear and objective standards for proposed project design. So an architect, a contractor, folks that look to these standards to see these are what I need to do to be able to obtain my permit. They're black and white in terms of review. If you meet the standards, you're approved by staff. There's no public process. Similar to every other building within town, our development code applies. If you're able to meet that code, you're approved. The guidelines, however, it's your way to vary from those black and white standards. They're more gray and flexible in terms of how they're written and how they're applied. You are intended to meet the standards that you can't necessarily meet. They are written in mind to have that flexibility that not everything fits within black and white. But again, to do our best to try to meet the standards intent, whatever that standard would be. And of course, the applicant chooses their path that's compliant. So if they're unable to meet these standards, then they'll go through our public process. They have that option. I won't dive into this too much. The purpose of this slide is just to kind of portray the product of what we're getting. This is what our design manual looks like in our development code. These are the residential standards that Robert created. You see the standards, the strict standards on the left, the variable guidelines that highlight the intent of said standards. And they include pictures and illustrations, for instance, setbacks. So here's, you see the kind of continuity in the setbacks of those historic buildings in a residential district. And then you have the illustration. New buildings, do this. Don't do this. This is how you can expect to see our downtown guidelines and standards as well. So what is a good example of one of those standards? I'd like to just kind of keep focused on setbacks since what I use for the residentials. The strict standard would be you have to build to the property line, to the front, similar to other buildings downtown. You have to build to your side property line, abutting the adjacent building, similar to other buildings in downtown. The guideline, if you're unable to meet that, new additions are encouraged to fill the lot width. And if you're unable to meet that, then it should go through review. So let's say there's a heritage tree that a property owner is attempting to preserve and would like a building addition, but the strict standards would require you to remove that heritage tree and build it all the way out. Potentially, that is something that could be approved through the guidelines. Or let's say if you want to convert your second story to residences and you require an emergency access, a staircase, something where, people need to have that space in between to be able to have the egress to get out in case of an emergency. These are all little things that, can meet the intent of the standard without meeting the strict standard. And then again, having that flexibility in our code where it's designed to where it's not prohibitive to be able to develop within our historic district. So again, this is from last year, but just these are some of the things that we talk about when we're talking about what are these standards regulating. We said building setbacks, building form, but then building components, so things like storefronts, awnings, entrances, windows, roof cornices, building materials, all of those can fall within the standards for regulation. And we kind of went over this, but Robert's work plan, so it includes, started off by establishing a framework and refining the structure of standards and guidelines as they'll apply to our historic downtown. Define the district character, so what are the things that we will propose to regulate through standards and guidelines. Developing detailed design guidance for buildings and features. How are these to be applied through design? Conducting a field review of existing conditions. We actually just did that today. But also I'm happy that, I don't know if you noticed, the Google Street car drove through here July 2025. So all of our street view is up to date. So in terms of having a capture in time of where we're at is actually pretty beneficial for that right now. And then, of course, preparing a supporting narrative. So showing how, just kind of where the context and the history of where these standards and guidelines are coming from, and then of course the graphics and illustrative materials to support those standards. Okay, so lastly, I mentioned that we have that deadline with the state to get that rough draft greenlit, make sure that it meets the Department of Interior standards for rehabilitation. Once that's done, we're able to kind of decide what our local process and engagement plan will be. So that's still being developed, and we definitely want to hear your thoughts, but at the minimum, it'll include City Council, downtown business and property owners, Planning Commission, and the Historic Landmarks Board. So yeah, with that, I'd like to open the floor to any of you. If you have any questions for staff or Roberts or comments, we're happy to hear.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I don't know if it's a question, more so a statement. Thank you for coming back, and I hope that means that you liked working with our staff and the council. I think, my concern, or not really concern, I guess, I think it's really important, all the work we're doing, but also in our vision planning, we just finished our 2040 vision plan, and it's really to revitalize downtown. And so the URA, which is kind of like the council in a different capacity, has purchased 2 additional properties. We had a 3rd gravel lot. And, I think, and I don't want to speak for the whole council, but I think that some of us know that the way to revitalize downtown is walkability, right? Really making sure there's housing close by to downtown. And so when we're doing these standards and guidelines, I just really want that to be kept in mind of I think Alexandria, I think of some, really dense, cool downtowns that also are inviting housing. And I think that's just really important to us as we move forward. So I just want to elevate that thought. Go ahead, Councilor Schimmel. I saw an eye.
Oh, thanks for rejoining, Robert, in this endeavor. And just as a background, my day job is commercial reconstruction or renovations. So I've had several years of interaction with joist tiers and with historic preservation. So I'm always thinking about operationalizing, standards and guidelines, and materials and methods can oftentimes be the Achilles heel of historic commercial renovation. So I'm curious generally between your experience with the residential versus commercial, how you have, or maybe just as a group, how you distinguish between the two in terms of determining guidelines on material and method, how you approach guidelines for materials and methods from commercial versus residential.
So yeah, for actually, and I don't have a big voice, so that's good. So can you hear me all right? Yeah. Actually, a good question. In a lot of ways, it's similar. Products are commercial, strictly commercial products are typically a little different than residential. On the other hand, for a commercial structure, and that's really my more architectural background of renovating commercial buildings and institutional buildings, and so I'm well versed in that end of it. But here we have really with the commercial buildings. You're in the historic district. You're primarily looking at the front of the building. So we had discussions when we did some walk around about materials and products, and things change over time. So I think there's a lot of what was done when the buildings were built was pretty simple construction by and large. Some were a little more elaborate. So it's from that standpoint, it's construction methods and products are fairly simple, really. You're not it's not like you're dealing with a downtown Washington, D.C. or New York City types of structures. So, and I was happy to see that a lot of the buildings, when you see the construction on the side, you see that they were board form concrete, which is, good to see. I mean, because a lot of old historic districts don't have that. They're, solid masonry construction, and that's more problematic, not from the guideline standpoint, but more from getting your building permit and getting, and so I've had a lot of discussions there because I think a lot of the success, economic success, is going to be tied to how do you do this? How strict is your, questions about, and the answers I was hearing was, made me happy that it sounded like your building department and your engineers and everything want to help support the community revitalize this. So because that's been some of the most difficult aspects to renovate buildings, seismic retrofits where a building department may be really overly harsh, and it just is too hard for the owners to do it. And in my mind, whatever we can do to keep the buildings vital is the way we want to do it. And that said, we don't want to have a district where buildings that are contributing become not contributing, and that's happened. And when that happens, the Park Service goes through and evaluates: does this still meet the balance point of having enough contributing buildings? I don't see that happening here. I think that there's a lot of support. There's a lot of things that aren't really architectural that we talked about too, or economic viability. And you're really blessed to having Pacific University here, I think. And I think there's good, in my mind, and this is not architectural, this is, sort of an economic thing, but it's what I observe. You travel around the country, and small towns that have a college or university are all thriving way more than towns that don't. And so that's a biggie that I think you could take better advantage of. I'll push you that way. And we discussed different, what would work, what doesn't, type of thing. But in terms of products, to come back and materials, and as you know, those things change. And I pointed out some things. Okay, well, this is engineered wood, for example. Is that okay or is that not? Or and so we sort of had those kinds of discussions. How there is latitude when you in the National Register properties and in renovation of how strict you want to be and how puristic of a restoration and rehabilitation. And so I think that's those discussions always come up in our office. We used to always have the three of us, McMath and Hawkins and I and Frank Allen, about what and kick it around. Okay, well, should it be this way or that way? And those are good discussions to have, I think. And they're not always set in stone one way or the other. So does that answer fully? Or
and a specific example in our historic district is just right at the corner.
I'm sorry.
A specific example on our historic district is right here at the corner with Urban Decanter and Dauntless, where the lower section was primarily changed from wood to aluminum.
The storefront.
Yeah, the storefront. So, and that's consistent with other projects or other cities that replace wood with aluminum, and that meets the state standards because the look is similar enough, even if the materials is very different. So, so I think that's a good example of both where it was done well and where it compromised a historic material.
Yeah, the material was
so
originally, as I understand it, you're saying the original material was wood.
Yeah,
and
right.
But the idea of the storefront was having a large display windows and transoms,
right?
And they retained that.
Yeah. They restored all the look at the material and methods primarily changed.
Yeah, and we looked at some of the, there's a lot of extruded metal, aluminum storefront, typical, strip mall, anywhere you go, factory stores, aluminum storefront, and, is that appropriate or not? Some districts don't want to have it. Some say as long as it fits the general aesthetic. Those, we looked at some were painted, some were like a brushed aluminum finish, a mill finish, and some were painted, or some were painted or dark anodized. So some things can stand out more in your eye than other things, and so I think though, but yeah, they might still be the same price, So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to do that, and I think that looking at, like you said, the big picture, does this sort of meet the intent or not? So,
If I may, Mayor, you also alluded to structural integrity, and this same property I know spent most of their money on structural upgrades before they even began on
right.
the storefront. So I know from a not only a cost but an investment standpoint, both for our grant money and the owner, is going to be structural integrity. And there's already an example on our street where a prior owner removed a structural post, and you can literally see the sag that after 15, 20 years then compromises the structure of the outlying buildings. And so when that owner approaches us with a grant to do something to the facade, it inherently will impact the neighboring as the property owner. So I'm not sure if and how that factors into our guidelines when we're making an investment and we're essentially complicit in whatever happens to those outlying buildings. Do we need to take some investment into that, or is there guidelines that ensure that we're not doing more harm to the entirety of the street on the structural side?
Actually, I think, I don't think the guidelines will get into that kind of a situation. It probably would come up during when they go to get permits, and I think we talked a little bit about that, when we walked around. Some of those, it's good that the one owner did the structural improvements, because often that's a hard sell because they just want to, you want to get this. And, I had a very good client in Albany in the First Street there that we, and great relationship over many years. And I was having to bear to get them to do the minimal strapping of his roof structure to the walls. I said, you should really do this, be good if you can, but it's just extra cost, and so I can't do it. But that's really outside the purview of what we're going to be looking at. But I would say it would probably likely come up during your discussion with permits.
Yeah,
and it should be appropriately. The other question, the other thing is, and I don't know where, and I wasn't sure either, is party walls, and how many of the buildings are they built over the lot line on the, because that is all over the map. In some cases, you don't even know, and you can look at a survey, and a surveyor doesn't know. But a true party wall would have the property line go right down the center of the wall, and so. Okay, well, what if one person's isn't taking care of their wall? Or what if it, is one building's taller than the other, or you want to add up? How do you do that? I don't know where that is here. I know when we did work in Jacksonville, sometimes the property lines were out in the street down there. That's something that can come up and it can be really tricky to do. But that's sort of outside of, we're looking at, what you see pretty much, and what products, is it, and, and sometimes they're readily available products, it may not be at Home Depot on the shelf, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's more expensive. It's just maybe a different color, something like that.
If I may add too, just that mine's that, so anything health and safety code related would not be preventable through historic review. So the urban decanter is a good example. So they have built the building and put in the fire department riser room and the fire department connection on outside. If there's any visual elements there, we'll try to make some suggestions, but at the end of the day, those things need to be there and they can't be prevented by historic review. If that makes sense. Those life and safety codes will supersede historic review to that.
Sometimes you can do things to, mitigate their presence if it's something that should be mitigated, you think, or, sometimes things can be painted, we had at Union Station, we did work for like 20 years there, and there was this, looked like there's a mushroom growing out of the clock tower. I said, what is that? Well, it was like a shortwave radio antenna or whatever. I said, well, can we paint it? Oh, yeah, you can paint it. How come nobody has? You get this mushroom growing out of the brick clock tower. So we painted it, and then nobody saw it afterwards.
We've sort of touched a little bit about, sort of one of the main concerns I have is, designing standards and guidelines that ultimately, deter property owners from investing in their buildings. And so one thing that I just want to make sure that we keep in mind is that, that these standards and guidelines really incentivize preservation and not, weaponize preservation. Because if, of course, if a building owner declines to make upgrades, declines, to do, some of these investments, then we're not really preserving the building for future use anyway. In fact, we're just sort of delaying, decline and decay. And so that's one thing. The other thing that I also, something that kind of comes to mind is that, our district is pretty small. The confines are pretty small district, and I don't think that there's a ton of opportunity for new development. But I know in some other districts, these standards apply even to new development, and that's a concern that I have because I think there's probably a few different schools of thought, in historic districts and historic preservation, but I'm of the mind that I don't want, this isn't a theme park, we're not trying, I mean, at least I don't think we're trying to build buildings to make them look old. I think, modern design can live next door to a historic, a preserved building. They can both contribute to the community. They can both, achieve a sense of place and identity without mimicking. And so that's another concern. I would not like to see guidelines and standards apply to new development and so that they would encourage that kind of sort of Disney, kind of architecture. Because I think that we've got, some places, I mean, Mayor, you've mentioned, we've got some opportunities that, we as an urban, sitting with our other hats, we've made some investments in our downtown to try to, sort of create some catalyst projects, to really revitalize our downtown, bring, breathe some new life. And that will have to include some housing. And so we need to be very careful to be incentivizing that kind of investment, not just. Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, so I'm going to ask Jesse to come up, and I don't know if Greg's in the. Hi, Greg. You pass this to Brian.
Nobody knew who you were the entire meeting.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to get started right away. This work session has run a little long over the hour. And so if there's consensus from the council, I'm just going to ask for permission. We had our executive session that's following tonight's meeting was canceled. And so if this runs long, can we finish it up after the URA meeting? Is that okay? Okay, I see head nods. So with that, we're here to talk about downtown parking, and we have Jesse and Greg here to do that. Just a friendly reminder, no public comment will be taken, and yeah, no formal action. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Jesse.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So I'll be doing a majority of the presenting here this evening. Brian Pohl, our community development, who would normally be doing this, is on scheduled leave. And then Dan Reardon had two other pretty large things on the agenda tonight. And so I'll be taking the lead on this one. And thank you to Greg in advance for
Thanks, Greg.
helping me with any questions that may come up. So tonight's work session is about downtown parking. This came up at the last meeting. The council requested a work session. Just please be a little bit forewarned. This is a pretty long and detailed presentation. I do want to kind of go through it fairly methodically so that there's kind of a complete understanding of how the study transpired and also what the results in the parking study were. And then, of course, answer any questions that the council may have. So with that, we're going to go over the background. We're going to go over some parking influencers. And then we met at the staff level a considerable amount discussing both at the traffic review board and just individually about potential solutions. So we'll go over some of those as well. And then, of course, receive feedback from the council on any direction that the council would like to go. So next slide, please. Already went through that. Next slide. I'm not going to go through all of these within the 2040 plan, but if you look at the 2040 plan, there's a couple action items that are specific to parking. For example, in this one, 1.13, increased wayfinding and signage for downtown parking. There are, however, a lot of action items that are related to parking or that parking would have an effect on that potential action item. And so not going to go through all these, but in the goal area of the economy, there's about 6 items that touch parking. If you go to the next one. In the goal area of community growth, there's about 3. 2.37 is specific to downtown parking. And if you go to the next goal area, community connection, we are going to get a little bit into a potential pedestrian mall and also community gathering spaces because those too can have an impact on parking. So a little bit of background. The city conducted a parking study in 2022. We're going to go through that in some level of detail. Also, just a couple years ago, the Department of Land Conservation and Development published a parking management guide to assist with communities. A parking management guide is essentially kind of a demand management guide as you experience certain parking issues or parking challenges. It has some recommended strategies for how to deal with those challenges. Interestingly enough, Forest Grove was a case example in the DLCD study. There was 2 other communities that were case example. The reason Forest Grove was chosen is we have a fairly high density commercial center in the downtown, namely along Main and 21st, and the other one was the proximity to Pacific University. And so how those 2 things kind of coalesce, how they interact with each other, what the contingencies were, what the patterns were, it's a pretty fascinating case study. And then the last bullet, as I mentioned, we'll go a little bit into demand strategies. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the parking study was done in 2022, accepted by the council in June of 22. There were 2 study days. One was on a Tuesday, and one was on a Saturday, and those days were selected by the consultant specifically for a reason. The one reason for the Tuesday was because that was a school day, and it was assumed that most of the classes, unlike a Monday or a Friday when you have fewer classes, all of the classes will be occurring on Tuesday. That was true for both the Forest Grove Community School and also for Pacific University. And then Saturday was chosen as a non-weekday and what the demand patterns were on a weekend. The study cost approximately $14,000. Next slide. This is the study area in question. This is what they commonly refer to in the study, and we'll refer to it in some of the graphs as the city center area. They actually looked at 2 specific areas. One was the city center, and then they did some separate studies for Main and 21st, between Pacific and 21st for Main, and then 21st between College and A, and that's the commonly referred to as the T. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. They also studied the parking lots. Next slide, please. when you start talking about parking and you start talking about demand strategies, one of the demand strategies that's kind of an initial demand strategy is what they call timed parking. And timed parking is where you have a time limit for parking. In Forest Grove's particular case, we've had time parking for decades. It's varied a little bit between 2 and 4 hours, but for the most part, the residential permit program was put in the, I think, 2005, somewhere in there. And then the hourly parking followed shortly thereafter. If you look at the existing map, most of it is 4-hour parking around Pacific, and then you have quite a bit of 2-hour parking in the downtown area. Those 4 hours and 2 hours only pertain to the daytime, only between 8 and 5. So after 5, there is no parking limitations. Next slide. So before we start looking at some of the graphs that came from the study, it's important to kind of understand what's called the 85% rule. And the 85% rule is a target occupancy of about 85%. If you look at a lot of the parking studies, this is kind of the common metric by which they measure parking studies. If you're above 85%, parking tends to cruise because you have too few vacancies in which to park. If you drop below 85%, that could mean that your demand management techniques are a little too strong. They're a little too much, and you may want to try and encourage actually more parking in a downtown area. Be mindful that on both ends of the spectrum, in some cases, if the demand strategies are too strong, people may say, you know what, I don't even want to go there. Parking is too expensive. I'm going to go somewhere else. So there's kind of both ends of that spectrum, if you will. The study selected a weekday and a weekend day, and they tested the occupancy between 10 a.m. prior to lunch and then 7 p.m., which was typically after the dinner hour. This is just an example that was in the Department of Land Conservation and Development study for demand management techniques. It's really just kind of a referral document. The arrows kind of point to approximately where the study concluded that Forest Grove was. So on the one spectrum on the top, there's little to no parking complaints. There's plenty of space to park. And as a result of that, you're really just doing assessment and outreach. There's really no demand management techniques. If you go all the way to the bottom, on the other extreme, it's always well occupied. It's very crowded. And some of the techniques for that is not only time parking, but paid parking, metered parking, high enforcement, etc. So those are the kind of two ends of the spectrum, if you will. A couple notes about the city's parking. All public parking in the city is free. So there is no metered parking. There's no parking fees for any of the parking lots. Of course, we've all driven into cities adjacent to us where parking is not free, and parking lots are by charge. And then third bullet, based on the study results, Forest Grove parking can be hard to find during peak times. We'll show you those peak times. But the overall supply is within what's called the 85% rule. This chart would indicate a need to look at kind of 4 strategies, and we're going to cover all of those in the presentation. Wayfinding, that's directional signage both at the parking lot and to the parking lot. Time-limited parking, we already have that. 3, employee parking away from the busiest areas. The thought is if you can have employee parking in a certain aggregate area that you could free up on-street parking for businesses. And then 4th, curb space for priority uses such as loading and unloading, what we're going to call a fast stop position. We'll get to that later in the presentation. Next slide. So to get into some of the study results, and again, this was 4 years ago. It was 2022. There are a few things that have changed as a result since 2022. We have had about 1,000 people come into the city, so we have had a population increase. If you look at some of the enrollment at Pacific University, it's remained steady. However, there has been a program or two that has moved out of Forest Grove to Hillsborough from a graduate study perspective, which would tend to think that you might free up a little bit of parking. So there's been kind of some on the plus side, maybe some also on the minus side. But this graph shows where the parking occupancy issues occur at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. Now, as you can imagine, school is in at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. There's kind of 2 things that are really highlighted here. One is all of the parking along College Way proximal to Pacific University is crowded. And then if you look at the parking on the north side of Pacific Avenue, north of the Forest Grove Community School, that also is full. So those areas are occupied. The 2 other things worth noting is parking lot 2, the Central City lot, and parking lot 3, The South Central City lot are full. That would tend to indicate that that's being used for employee parking because it's full in the middle of the day. Interestingly enough, if you go beyond those areas, whether it's Main Street, whether it's 21st, Pacific Avenue, and especially down at 19th, and also the parking lots 4 and 5, there's occupancy. So next slide, please. This is the same day at 5 p.m. Now, what you'll see here is that the trend has shifted. Whereas it was red before on College Way, a lot of that parking is now shifted to Main Street, where previously there were some vacancies. This would indicate that school is out. So the students have left, parking is freed up. It also indicates a higher demand in the downtown area for shopping, for business, for eating, etc. And so just kind of noting that shift. The other thing worth noting here is parking lot 2 is green, indicating it is below 85% occupancy. And in this case, it's at about 25% occupancy, meaning there's quite a few stalls. And then 3 is in that middle range at about 50% occupancy, indicating that if parking is crowded on Main Street, there is available parking in parking lot number 2, just behind some of those businesses. Next slide. This shows the same kind of demand area. It's the city center area, but it's all day. So in this particular case, it's Tuesday. It's all day. It starts at 10 a.m. and it goes all the way to 7 p.m. And what you'll see here is in that broader city center area, that entire area that we were looking at before, you really don't get above 65% occupancy. So that would indicate that in that particular area, there's stalls available. It's well under the 85% occupancy. Next slide. This is a smaller geographic area. This is the T, Main and 21st, and it also shows the same time paradigm that we had in the other one. What this would indicate is that you have availability in the central T on Main and 21st all the way up until the evening. And then in the evening, as the previous graph showed, it does get full. And so the parking on Main and 21st in that particular area is going to show red. It's going to be difficult to find a parking position. You're going to be circulating, or you're going to park a block or two away where there is occupancy. Next slide. So same study area, different day. In this particular case, it's Saturday. And we do, toward the end of the presentation, have a slide that shows a summer month, in this case, uncorked on a Saturday. We'll go into that when we talk a little bit about events and placemaking. But in this particular case, it's noon. It's a Saturday. Notice, again, it's the same kind of demand pattern that you saw on a weekday evening. So you have green on College Way, where there's availability, but you have a crowded downtown. In this particular case, you also have Central City Lot number 2 is full. So all the streets on Main Street are full. If you look at 19th and Pacific, those are also Pacific and 21st, those are also fairly full. But it's, again, that kind of reverse pattern that we saw on a Tuesday day, and it's similar to what we saw on a weekday evening. I would point out lots 4, 5, and 6, and 7 are also available. And in this case, lot number 1 is also available. Next slide. So this is Saturday at 6 p.m. So this is kind of an interesting graph. What this would indicate is that for some reason, you have more parking now on A Street. We believe this is probably a result of the Jesse Quinn development, where you have some on-street parking occurring in the evening, folks trying to find a parking spot that are living there. It might also indicate some demand from a commercial perspective on that same block, and that would explain the red on the north side of Pacific Avenue. Main Street is still crowded. Interestingly enough, parking lot 2 frees up a little bit. This would indicate that potentially at 6 p.m., some of the employees that may have otherwise been working are leaving, which would free up some space for shopping and dining, etc. But if you look south, parking lots 3 through 7 are all plenty of stalls available for parking, as well as on College Way. Next slide. These are, again, just the kind of time graphs that take you throughout the whole day. This is on a Saturday for the entire city center area. It indicates that we don't reach that 85% threshold. If you go to the next slide, this is the T area. It indicates that we do reach that threshold approximately 1:30 to 2, so in that kind of early afternoon time. On the other times of the window, there's parking availability within the central T. So to get into the parking lots a little bit, we also have some occupancy tables for the parking lots. Overall, the city owns 7 public parking lots, as I mentioned earlier. None of them are charged. There's 37 of which, of the 202 total stalls, 37 are timed. Those are in lots 4 and 5. That's the community auditorium just south of here, and then across the street. That's timed during the day and the weekdays. On the weekends and in the evenings, they are not timed. All of the lots are unregulated, meaning there's no permit, there's no time limits, and there's no fee to park. So next slide. This is the most crowded lot that the city owns, and that's the Central City lot. And they did the same 2 study days. And what's kind of interesting about this particular graph is it would indicate that during the week, on a Thursday, that you will see there is over 85% occupancy. This lot is full between 10 a.m. and approximately 4 p.m. And then the demand drops off. That would indicate that during the week, this is being used as employee parking. So that Central City lot, when it shows red, it is in fact, this data is backing up that those are employees that are parking there. If you look at the same parking lot on a Saturday, what you see is that that drops below the 85%. This would indicate that there's either fewer employees parking there and it's being used more for, shopping, for dining, etc. So just different demand patterns. This is all the rest of the city lots. The one I would just point out on here is the upper right. That is lot number 3. That was the other one that tended to be full during the weekday, and then the demand would drop off after that 4 o'clock time frame. That would also indicate that lot 3, which is our lot right just west of us, would also be used for employee parking. All of the other parking lots, there's quite a bit of vacancy in each of them throughout the day. So the study also looked at outer blocks. So in theory, what is the impact to some of the areas around that particular city center area? What it found is that the impact was the largest in the northeast section. None of the 3 areas, however, reached that 85% threshold, but the northeast section did have the most kind of demand, if you will, during the week. Next slide. So the findings that the parking study had was generally it's working reasonably well. So the demand strategies that are in place with regard to the supply of the city parking lots, but also the time parking, where the time parking is at, how it's being managed, that generally speaking, it's working pretty well. They did note that there was localized congestion with little to no parking at peak times. The graphs clearly show that. However, there's congestion is limited to small areas during those times, and, quote, downtown as a whole has ample parking supply to accommodate demand even during the busiest times. However, the study also noted that there's underutilization exists, and that can be improved upon to manage and possibly reduce parking congestion during those peak times with some strategies. So next slide, please. So the study's recommendations, and I know this gets a little bit specific, but these were the main recommendations that the study came up with. Prioritize the maintenance of Central Lot 2. That's what we were referring to as the Central City Lot. That's the one that is west of all the main street, a lot of the main street businesses, and then south of some of the 21st and north of some of the Pacific. It's that Central City Lot. They say this is really kind of the key to the system working. And what they mean by the key to the system working is it absorbs employee parking during the week, freeing up on-street spots for business. And then in the weekend, it tends to not have employee parking and therefore having more spots for businesses during the weekend. They did consider designating Central Lot 2 employee only. We'll go into that in a little bit in a future slide. They said specifically do not consider Lot 1. Lot 1 is that lot that is just to the east of A and north of 21st, that smaller kind of parking lot up there. They said emphatically do not consider that for employee parking. That is ideal for customer parking. The graphs would indicate that it might get some employee parking, and so I don't know that this would be much of an impact for employees that may park there. It did indicate that it is principally being used for customer parking. But it did say to consider 2-hour time limits just to improve circulation. So in other words, kind of make it the same as all of the on-street parking in the downtown. The 2-hour limits would be imposed between 8 and 5, and then, but not on the weekends and not at the end of the day. Install more recognizable and consistent parking signage for parking lots, install wayfinding signs, and then restripe additional stalls in the downtown area if you can find some. And we'll get into all of these in the subsequent slides as well. Next slide, please. So some influencers. And this is just a little bit of background that in addition to the study, there's other things that will influence parking in the central city area. And we've identified or just kind of built upon 4 of them. And there's code enforcement, signage, wayfinding, and then street closures. The next slide, please. So parking citations in the past 2 years have declined. I will say that they've rebounded in 2026. And so that trend is kind of reversing and going back up the other way. Next slide, please. Parking citations, the council doubled the parking citations in 2025 from 15 to 30. So parking revenue is up for fiscal year 25 to 26. This is through February. It's expected to go up a fair amount by the end of the fiscal year. All the parking revenue is deposited into the general fund. Next slide. So a little bit about signage. Parking lot signage is inconsistent. However, all of the lots are signed. They're just signed a little bit inconsistently. We know at least one of these pictures, one of the signs is gone. But that being said, we still need to take a more comprehensive approach to it. So next slide. So thanks to Greg and his team, they put this map together on relatively short notice. This shows the signs that are wayfinding signs. These are signs directing you to the parking lot, not the sign at the parking lot. And there are some wayfinding signs. What the study was really recommending was to broaden this out and have some additional wayfinding signs along some of the major arterials, such as Sunset, possibly Main, but also along Pacific and 19th, directing you to those lots in advance, if that makes sense. Next slide. And then this was, it didn't transpose very well. Sorry, some of the numbers got sent down to another level. But this map shows a number of different things. There's kind of a lot here. So if I can go through this, the red number is the number of days the street was closed for an event for 6 hours or more. So if you look at this, Main Street was closed for 32 days last year between Pacific and 21st. 21st Avenue between College and Main was closed 11 times, and then 21st Avenue between the alley and Main Street was closed 8 times. College Way was closed once. The blue number is the number of storefronts. So storefronts is different than small businesses. Storefront can be any measure of storefront. It could be a nonprofit, it could be American Legion, it could be Adelante, it could be Pacific University. It's a storefront. It's not a small business, but if you look at the number of storefronts, those are the corresponding number of storefronts for that section of street, and then the green is the number of small businesses that are located in that particular section of the street. So as you can tell, and as I think everybody anecdotally knows, Main Street is busy. So as I mentioned earlier, this was actually done clear back in 2019, just before COVID. But what it shows was an event that occurred at 6 p.m. on Saturday. It was during Uncorked. And in this particular case, Main Street was closed, as you can tell by the graph. And it was a pretty popular event. And at 6 p.m., that's what the parking looked like. And so oftentimes when there's a big event in downtown, you kind of hear the report that there's no parking in downtown. Well, this map would indicate that certainly in that particular area, if you wanted to find a spot for parking, you'd have to go a little bit beyond what the normal study area was to find a green spot to park, because it does fill up a little bit more so in downtown. Next slide. So Mayor, how about at this point, before we get into potential solutions, I'd be happy to answer any questions. These are the potential solutions that we have a slide for each of these. We had provided, there's an opportunity for council to comment on each of these, but maybe before going into those potential solutions, Mayor, if there were any questions, Greg or I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Okay, Council President Valenzuela.
Yes. So it seems to me, given the results, that we don't have, I think it just needs to be reorganized. For example, I would really support the Lot 2 being assigned to employees, but really enforced.
Yeah.
You know, they get a tag, you know, or whatever in their card, they need to register. It would really need to be enforced. And I think the signs and everything, you know, just redoing that, making everything more visible would definitely help people to the other, you know, to the green parking spaces like 3, because I think it just needs to be reorganized. And yes, we have big events. I would love to have a trolley. So I'm going to say when we have a big event, I would love to have a trolley. I've been bothering Jesse with this for about 4 years about having a trolley that, you know, picks up people and takes them right to the market, right to the farmer's market, like they do for graduation at Pacific. You have a shuttle that picks you up and takes you, you know, to the venue. So, but I really, you know, for those recommendations, those are my thoughts about parking number 2.
But I thank you, Councilor Valenzuela, and I think we're going to go into each of these in some level of detail.
Okay.
And so we might be able to touch on the staffing part with the
Yeah.
time 2-hour parking in Lot 1. There are some concerns there, but we can address that more when we get to that slide,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Sure. And just one more thing about the private parking lots. You've been in conversations, but from the presentation, I sense there hasn't been, you know, a very
Yeah, we'll
positive
we'll also talk a
reciprocal-
little bit
we'll
about
talk
that.
about
and,
that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you guys ask for questions,
Any other questions?
comments.
Go ahead,
Whatever.
Counselor Schimmel, and then I have one or two.
I was curious, since 2022, have you, are you aware of any known or emerging factors we should consider otherwise?
Since 2022, or well, the things that we kind of talked about internally is the population has gone up approximately 1,000 since 2022. Actually, it might be a little bit less. This is somewhat anecdotal. The number of storefronts in the particular study area is approximately the same. Exactly the number of businesses, however, that were in business at the time in 2022 versus now, I'm not sure that I have a firm answer to that. I think approximately the same, but I'm not for sure on that. We do know that at the university, Pacific University, enrollment has either remained kind of steady or in some places gone down just a little bit. And some of the programs, potentially in the graduate department, have moved to Hillsborough. So that would indicate, you know, maybe potentially during the day at least, less demand for parking. The other influencer that wasn't mentioned was Pacific University has done a really good job of improving their parking. This came up during the Pacific University Master Plan, and they've done a number of things to improve parking. They developed a parking lot just to the east of, I believe, not just to the east of Cedar. I was thinking Elm, but I know it was, yeah, just to the east of Cedar. That I think has 20-some positions. They also made significant improvements to the cannery lot. That was in cooperation with the city. We helped them with some lighting. There was some concern about safety regarding lighting from the cannery lot to the university, so it was not getting used very much. We helped with some of the lighting. That has improved the utilization of the cannery lot. And Pacific itself also, I don't know whether they implemented it, but they also discussed some demand management techniques internally in terms of issuing permits, having a cost for the permit, et cetera. So they've made quite a bit of improvements since the time of the study to try and take some of the parking off the street and into their parking lots. So those are some of the larger influencers that we're aware of.
One other question. On the central lot, what major maintenance has been done in the last 4 or 5 years?
The only thing that I'm aware of that's been done was a fog seal, basically a seal coat type light shot, so that we could restrict the parking lot and get some additional parking efficiency in the lot. As a result, we added 11 additional spaces to that lot without really doing much of anything, just increasing efficiency. And now that we've acquired the property, where the theater is or used to be. There's opportunity for probably for another dozen parking stalls in the back, properly striped. And I think we could get a couple more in on either side of the aisles. I left them a little wide.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have, I want to stay on topic with parking, and I don't know if we need to have maybe just consensus for a work session, but I'm interested in moving events,
Yeah.
Uncorked, Oktoberfest off of Main Street and onto College. And so just because if we're looking at parking spaces, when and there's literally one storefront, and also when the events are taking place are usually weekends when university is not in session. I just think that moves it, and it's only one block over. But then, and I've been listening to Jody even talk about the market and like getting a flow of traffic. So right now, when there is an event, like when I've gone to Oktoberfest or Uncorked, you go down Main Street and it tees, right? We're using it like a T. There's really not any sort of looping or route that you walk. It's very clustered and kind of congested. So if we moved those events onto College and then still use 21st, right, you're creating like more of a route and you can expand. But I also think you preserve parking spaces. You don't affect, you actually use the event to bring people downtown to shop and eat at those storefronts and those restaurants instead of blocking. So anyways, I don't know if that needs to happen. I don't think we can really talk about it now, but I guess I'm just pointing out there, is there any sort of desire from the council or consensus to talk about events? And I don't even know, can we say like, hey, not on Main Street? Can we even do that as a council? Say, hey, we don't want events closing our Main Street 32 days a year?
Yeah, I think, there's a placemaking conversation to be had, mayors specifically regarding kind of where events are, what might be a template to kind of create associated with what type of event, and really kind of what does that gathering space look like? We do have a slide kind of toward the end of this, that has that kind of tie to the parking and how many spots it is, et cetera. And
Because one more thing too is that when I went to DC this last time and the last few times I went, we're asking for federal funding and we're trying to make 21st be the festival street. And the natural, and and I don't want to speak for Pacific, but they've been pretty welcoming the last few years about saying, hey, use our yard, use our grass. Like, so that's the intersection of a plaza. Like, that's what we have been saying we're trying to do is create 21st. And I just think 21st to College makes a lot of sense, but that's just my personal opinion. So
toward the end, we actually have a slide on Festival Street.
So I'll wait, I guess.
Conceptually what it would.
I'd like you all to start thinking about that. Maybe a work session. Okay, cool. And then one more question I wrote down.
Yeah.
With the signage, our branding, we also put some funding towards like this idea of branding. And so I just want to make sure that we keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Like the branding, the signage should all happen at the same time.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So next slide, please. So this is just going to kind of go through that whole list that we just looked at kind of one-on-one. And the intent here was to kind of throw an idea or a potential solution out there and then turn it over to the mayor and see if there's any comments from the council. So code enforcement, this is really already occurring. Enforcement generally leads to increased circulation of vehicles and time parking areas, which will increase stall availability. So this one's already happening. So any comments?
No, I guess my question or comment would be, because I think we tend to get not most emails, but there's a good percentage of our emails about code enforcement. So I'm just wondering if the police department has done like inventory, are we staffing correctly for code enforcement? Do we need to reallocate some funds so there's more code enforcement? And then like also accountability of how much of that person's time is on code, how are we, I guess, what is the metric that we're using to make sure we're staying on track with code enforcement?
Yeah, kind of, I'm not sure if I have a specific answer, but typically what we see in code enforcement is by complaint. And so sometimes we get more complaints than we do at other times. And when those complaints come in, the code enforcement officer goes and it tries to address that complaint. Some of the complaints can be a little more complex than others. take a little bit more time, and that it sometimes may take away from some of the more, I would say kind of, the base duties, if you will, of the position, like in this case, parking. So time does get diverted away to some of these other code enforcement cases. What we've seen recently, I think, is going back to some of the parking areas, looking at the position a little bit more closely, and then in some cases we're just not, what it leads to is an increase in the amount of time to respond to other code complaints, depending upon how much parking you may do, if that makes sense. So if you dedicate 50% of a position to parking, then your response times on some of the other complaints may go up. And so I guess at the end of the day, it's a balancing act, and it's going to depend on the number of complaints, the complexity of the complaints, and then of course how much time we have to dedicate to the complaints. Did that answer your question, Mayor? So
Yeah.
kind of.
Well, no. I mean, I would just be interested in knowing, how does a supervisor manage that? Like, is there a metric we're trying to hit, or
I think
I'm just curious.
I don't know that there's a specific metric, except for trying to get increasing compliance and trying to make sure we have our codes enforced equally and as applicably as we can. I think generally speaking, the strategy is, if you do have some level of complexity in a code enforcement case, to try to get it to a certain point where it can begin, that you've made an inquiry, that you've sent a letter. You're not going to be able to kind of solve it all at once, but you can oftentimes solve it in increments, if you will, or address it in increments. Parking is a little bit different. Parking is something that you can just dedicate a certain amount of time to. You can go out, you can do spot checks, you can do random checks, you can do programmatic checks. So you can vary it somewhat depending upon what your other workload is. It still at the end is kind of a balancing act, though. So, okay, next slide. So signage and wayfinding. Greg and Public Works have done, I think, a really good job of kind of sitting down and doing, starting at least a comprehensive inventory as demonstrated by the map and some of the photos. So we're really taking a broader look at this, not just an individual kind of, if there's a complaint about this parking lot or that parking lot, we're really looking at this holistically and comprehensively. I think the goal is to install some signage this summer. It may result in a supplemental budget request. Mayor, to address some of your comments about the branding part of it, we do want to incorporate branding into signage. There are certain parts of the wayfinding that may be more applicable to brands than others. For example, there are some wayfinding signs that are kind of universally recognized that may be more appropriate for some of the arterials and some of the, the main streets, if you will, like Pacific and 19th. Those are the blue Bs that you see with arrows. When you get to the parking lot, however, that's oftentimes where you may see a municipality do the branding as in the actual parking lot itself. And those are kind of reminders about where you park, what lot you're parking at. So those are generally more specific to the parking lot itself. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So to get there, it's kind of a common wayfinding, but when you're at that lot, you may have a name, you may have a brand, that sort of thing.
Go ahead, Councilor Faulkner.
When I'm in a new city, in a place I'm not very familiar, I think it's, I recognize the, design, like I think branding can be really good and valuable and important for wayfinding. But when I hear you say think like, the typical, what you tend to look for is like that sort of like blue public.
Yeah.
I think that has to be replicated though, even on the branded signs, because you're looking, when you're new to a city, you do this intuitively, you probably don't even realize it. You're looking for the match, like, oh, I saw that blue P sign. And so I want to find where that blue P sign is. And if I see a city sign, I'm not going to think that I'm allowed to park there. I'm going to think that that's city employee parking. Even if it says public parking, I'm going to think, oh, I'm only supposed to park there if I'm doing business with the city. And so I think that we can do a good job of mirroring, and even on those, even on the 19th or, Pacific Ave, I think it's important, we can even put our little logo on those, but making sure that there's some connection between the two.
Yeah, full agreement. What I was maybe intending to say, and I may not have stated it very well, is when you get kind of into the parking lot, a lot of times what you'll see is on certain rows or in the medians, et cetera, that's where some of the branding may occur. But to get to it and to get into it, that's really common kind of wayfinding techniques that are used there. So,
Yeah, and if I may, I think I think it's great. I hope that you do come back with a supplemental budget request, because when I look at these charts, what I see is that there's, even for residents, I think there's probably a lack of maybe recognition and understanding that there is so much parking available just 1 to 2 blocks away. A lot of times, I think especially 19th Avenue, there's never parking on 19th Avenue, and you're essentially allowed to park on the entire length of it, all the way to the, where it forks.
Yeah.
And, that's very close by parking to our downtown businesses, but no one's using it. And so I think that those signs, depending on where you put them, and if you put them in enough of them, people will start to learn and to understand, that, there's, I'm allowed to park here, even though, and I think striping too. So not just wayfinding, but I think striping, like we do in the downtown area. If we actually marked stalls on some of those streets where there's not as much parking as we might hope to see, I would encourage that maybe as an option.
Yeah, we actually have that's one of the next slides, Counselor. So next slide. So city lot number 2, as Greg mentioned, we've already added 11 additional parking stalls there. So what we talked about here, and this gets to your point a little bit, Counselor Valenzuela, is perhaps putting up some employee-only signs. To be candid, implementing a permit system, a registration system right now, and then trying to do compliance associated with that would be difficult with our existing code enforcement. And so what we were recommending, at least as an interim measure, and we can consider this as probably a future measure, but what we were recommending as an interim is, it has been shown that if you put up employee parking only signs between 8 and 5 per se, Monday through Friday, that you do get some compliance associated with that. And that the next demand management strategy, if that becomes, well over 85% occupancy on a routine basis, then kind of the next demand management strategy would be to then do some type of registration system where you'd have to register your employees. Those can be pretty time intensive. Especially if you want to manage those in a way that is accurate and that is enforceable, because you're going to have to connect kind of the permit with the vehicle, with the person parking, who's the employee. So those can be pretty time intensive. But at this particular stage, what we were looking at was, depending on council's comments, of course, was putting up some employee-only parking signs, and then taken in combination with a lot of these other things, see what the results are, and then maybe consider the next demand management strategy being some type of potential permit system for the central city lot.
Go ahead, Councilor Marshall.
Yep. Yep. Oh, they're doing private agreements? Yeah. That's pretty common, yeah. In the central city lot or on-street parking? Oh. And we, yeah.
If you're looking at slowest days of the month are going to be the days that the streets are shut down, and you're shutting on a business basically for 32 days a year, that's basically a whole month of bad business. So I'm with looking at a different location for these events. As far as employee parking, I don't know how that's going to be manageable, just for the fact that myself, being a small business, has 9 employees. On a busy
Yeah.
day, I have all 9 employees working. That's a decent amount of that parking lot already gone just by a small business like mine.
Yeah,
So
and I
if you get
think,
bigger businesses, it doesn't necessarily, it's putting 5 pounds of feed into a 2-pound bag. It's not going to work.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And it's, if you look at different locations, and why are we making people that want to come visit downtown park further away and stay in town for 3-4 hours, or let the employees that are going to be there all day get closer access? I don't know. I make either my employees, if they don't have parking lot, because I have a private parking lot for them, if they aren't there, they park down the street, or they park further away.
Hmm.
So they have to walk in, because it just makes sense to have your customers park closer.
yeah.
That's me as a business owner. That's what I would think. So as far as employee parking, I don't know that would work.
Yeah, and so this was something that I think the study was saying that Central City Lot was essentially being used as employee parking. Whether the city would want to encourage that or not encourage it, I think it's up to the city. One of the things that they were kind of noting was, to the extent that employees may park in the Central City Lot, and I think, Counselor, what you're mentioning is that if they parked not on street in Main Street and 21st, not at the T on street parking, and they didn't park in Central City Lot, but they would park somewhere else, yeah, that would free up the Central City Lot for additional shoppers and additional patrons, et cetera. The way the study noted that the parking was functioning right now, not, kind of absent additional demand management strategies, was that the Central City Lot was essentially being used as an employee lot. And that, according to the study, would essentially kind of free up potentially some on-street parking. That doesn't address the same scenario that you're referring to, though, which would be not necessarily allowing employees park in the Central City Lot and having them park at a parking lot further away, and encourage employee parking somewhere other than that, if I understand your concern
Yeah, I
correctly.
mean, there's the one that's east of A Street, right there off 21st.
The one that's,
Another little lot.
That little tiny lot that's right
Yeah.
across the street, right there. Yeah, something like that would be like a better location to me. It would open up and free up that many more spaces potentially at lot B or lot 2. So lot
Center
1.
lot, yeah.
yeah, so Lot 1 is the one that the consultant was recommending to do 2-hour parking there, to try and free that up for shoppers and diners, et cetera, because that is being used to a certain extent, not to the same extent that Lot 2 is, but it is being used to a certain extent for employee parking during the day.
But
So-
I mean, for example, if you're looking at somebody wanting to go to Urban Canter, are they going to want to park at 1 or park at 2? That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. It's like that's a block and a half, 2 blocks to get there, or they can just walk around the corner.
Mhm.
And that's where I mean, there's options for people to park, but people don't want to walk. The employees don't even want
Yeah.
to walk that far, and
I think-
there's a number of issues is where it's, in my language, people are being lazy. Walk a little bit further. Like,
I think that becomes part of the issue,
True
is
story.
where does the city want to kind of do some demand management to encourage certain types of parking behaviors? That's really what demand management
I
is.
mean,
So,
I don't even know if it would benefit to do a 2-hour parking or a 4-hour parking in the lot 2.
the 4-hour parking is kind of an in-between, it could, potentially incentivize a little bit more turnover. And in doing so, maybe allow for additional patrons. At the same time, what you oftentimes see in parking lots like that is you'll get turnover at 4 hours, but then you might get the same parker that kind of circulates and comes back. So it just kind of depends on what you're trying to incentivize. But if we could go, yeah.
Yeah, I think that Councilor Marshall brings up some good points with the central
Yeah.
city lot. I think that it's central, and I don't know if I'm 100% on board of encouraging employee only.
Okay,
I think
that's fine.
I don't know how the rest of the group feels, but is there
Because what I was thinking was the fact that some business owners have complained that their employees park on 21st on Main, and then every 2 hours they have to get up and go and change, move the car, right? So, okay, well, let's put them over there. But what you're saying makes total sense. Let's open that up for customers as well as Main Street. You know what I mean? That would just invite more people, and you're also right that people do not want to walk. But when I started working as a young girl, I remember being told that we, as employees, had to park on the very, very last part of the, parking lot of the grocery store. We couldn't park nearby because the rest was for the customers.
Yeah.
And that's, like Jesse said, a behavior. How do you motivate, those changes, people to behave in a certain way?
Well, good comments. Thank you for the feedback. We have time for one more, Mayor?
I think we have,
Couple more,
no,
maybe?
no, we don't. We're going to call it here because it's 6:57 and I would like to have a bio break. The meeting starts at 7, right? Yeah, it's 3 minutes. So we're going
Okay,
to
so
stop
we
here.
left off at number Central City Lot 2, so
We finished that. Okay,
thank you.
so let's take a few minutes to go to the bathroom.
Recording stopped.
Well, I kind of spit. Sorry. We're going to finish our parking work session because according to the agenda, our URA meeting starts at 9. So we don't want to start it early. So we're going to start, I'm going to reconvene the work session on the parking study. No public comment will be taken and no formal action. And we're going to I think we're done with Central City Lot 2. Jesse. Yeah, let's go to Lot 1.
Okay, so the third potential solution, and also this came out of the parking study as well, was to do 2-hour parking time limits on lot number 1. That's located at the northeast corner of 21st and A. The study noted that this lot was ideally suited for shoppers and patrons. It could benefit by installing 2-hour parking time limits. This would affirm the usage by shoppers and patrons and reduce employee parking that may be occurring there. We have indications that there may be some employees parking there, but it's not as full, if you will, as the Central City lot. If the council would like to look at installing 2-hour parking there, this could become part of the code enforcement because we have 2- and 4-hour parking directly adjacent to it. 2-hour and 4-hour parking is different than employee parking in terms of code enforcement. It doesn't require a permit system, a registration system, etc. So we could incorporate this into the code enforcement duties if the council would like to do this. So with that, I'll turn it over for discussion, Mayor.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
How many parking spaces are there? And are all the other public parking lots, how many hours are those?
So if you could go back, Mariah, to the slide, I think it's like slide, keep going, 8 or 9.
They all 4? I mean, are they all, are we
one-
consistent with the
One
time?
forward. Keep going forward. It's a table. Keep going. Keep going. There it is. Back. That one. So lot number 1 has 18 unregulated parking positions. The other 2 parking lots that have some type of time parking are lots 4 and 5. That's the parking lot right here at the community auditorium, and it's 2-hour parking during the day on weekdays, and then the employee parking lot, which has time parking for the public during working hours that are non-employee parking positions. Does that answer your question, Mayor?
And I can see that.
So this would look at installing 2-hour parking on lot number 1. That would be timed parking. The other 37 stalls that we have are 2-hour time, but it's during the week and it's not during the evening or the weekend. Can you go back to the, thanks, Mariah.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on lot 1, timed parking? Is there any consensus to do that?
Yeah, but
That's the one I think should be employee parking.
yeah,
Personally,
It's 18 spots, so
I mean, that's 18 spots that we could have in the central location.
I know.
But I honestly, what's going to happen is if you make that employee parking, you're going to have 18 people park there, and then the rest of the other employees are going to park at the
The
lot
central.
2.
Yeah.
Right. That's where we run into it. It's just taken up by employee parking.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying this for my own parking. I have parking in the back of my restaurant. I'm not saying this to benefit myself by any means. My employees don't use it. I just know that for a fact the the majority of it is employees from those local businesses parking.
Yeah. So
Wait,
we,
Jess, okay, sorry.
And that would be the thing, is if we could figure out what
How
business
many?
has the most people parking there. Figure out that, because that's what it is who's the ones parking there.
yeah, so you explained that really well, and it makes a lot of sense. So perhaps at the central one, I mean, parking two, the very end by the wall, perhaps we could have some of them be a timed parking, like 2-hour parking in the central one. Not all of them, just a few, the ones at the end.
I think that's confusing for patrons and code enforcement to, you know what I mean? Like if you go into a lot, like over here is timed. I don't know. And I don't know if it's achieving. I mean, I just want us like to come back to our goal, like what we're trying to achieve, right? We're trying to, I mean, I guess, how do I want to put it? The data shows that we don't really have a parking problem, right? We have a wayfinding, a signage problem, like telling people where to park.
Yes.
So
That's where
I think
that's
I-
where I run into the issue, is living it day to day.
yeah,
I don't know that parking, that study was correct. Like, it would have to be more than one day on a
Well-
random Tuesday showing that it would be correct. They'd have to do a more feasible study, would be doing it over a portion of time to see what it is.
And
And
summertime.
we can't go back. I mean, that's so long ago. But I'm just this.
I agree and disagree because
I agree and disagree with myself on this. But the fact is that on 21st and on Main Street, that's where the parking is the issue.
right.
So
So people need to park
biggest,
here.
the biggest thing is the reason why the issue is parking on there is because that parking lot is full.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so that's where
Yeah.
we run into the parking on the sidewalks that are issues.
And also, this was in February, correct?
Well, what
Maybe
I'm
summertime would also be a good idea because people are more out
Would
and
hate to
about.
I think we could figure this out without having to spend the money to have another
Study.
study. I mean, we're just trying to figure out.
yeah. Go ahead, Counselor Falconer, and then that one.
I mean, I really hesitate to make any of these lots employee parking. Here's the big thing that we haven't talked about. We don't have a current system for registering, and we don't have that's a huge staff
don't wanna
lift.
do that,
We
yeah.
don't have.
The big lift.
That's a really big lift. And I think that we have smaller, like if we go back to the chart, the DLCD's chart for like, here's what you can, here are the considerations. I don't think we're there yet. I think yes, the parking, the study is a few years old. Maybe it has changed a little bit, but we haven't even tried educating people a little bit more on additional parking options that are currently available.
Like the lot that's down
And-
off of the public one that's was that
Yeah, the 4 through
19th
7 and
19th
yeah.
and Ash area that doesn't get used.
Plus, there's a lot of
and
street
I mean-
parking. There's a ton of street parking that is open and untimed
Yes,
currently.
it's just the biggest issue is that downtown 21st and Main area.
Right, and so if
that's what we're- and
people
nobody
knew,
wants to walk.
well,
2
they're-
blocks.
They're gonna have to walk 2 blocks.
Exactly. No,
I
no,
th- that like I'm gonna elevate what Angel said because in the last 12 years I come downtown a lot and go to a lot of events and I don't expect to park right where I'm gonna be. I park in the city parking lot often, or I park here and I walk at the very most when I park in a parking lot like down here to go up, it's like 2 to 4 blocks.
Yeah.
Which is it's nothing. And so I think it's really about the signage, the wayfinding, like the educating of like, hey, you can park here. These are all the places you can park. And maybe even like doing a social media blast,
Yeah.
right? Then like
So-
doing the other things.
and we-
Yeah.
Just
like
from
that.
what I've heard from the businesses up there, I think it is a lot of like the kind of quick in and out businesses. Like you have the restaurants, you have those type of ones that are like in and out, like even Framers Touch where they go to pick something up. If there was a designated
30
spot that
minute.
was like a 30-minute
Mhm.
parking, a couple per block, I personally think that would be a huge like step in the right direction to
Mhm.
ease
Yeah.
that congestion in parking and just know that there's it.
Jesse's like, that's one of our options.
One of the slides.
Yeah, sorry.
Coming up.
That's where I would go with it. That's what I've been hearing. So
Okay, so for lot 1, we're not going to do a 2-hour parking? Do we want to do, so we don't want to make it employee only. No employee, I'm hearing no employee only or recommended employee for parking lots. Do we want to install limits in the parking lot?
So we also have to go back to, can our code enforcement keep up with that and do the other parts of their job? So right now it's hard for them to come up and do downtown area.
I would like to see that there be more priority placed on, like, that's like what I was trying to get out
Yeah.
earlier, is if you start going down a rabbit hole of like, there always has to be efficiency, right? Like if you're going down and you're, following this one code issue and you're going and going and going, like how much time and how much money is that costing taxpayers
Yeah.
and what do you get out of it? And that's why, and I wasn't trying to be like into personnel, but to me, like that's something that needs to be looked at.
It's a base responsibility of the position to do parking enforcement. And so I think some of the
There has to be
conversation
accountability.
is a certain percentage of the job has to be dedicated to that, and it needs to be a certain percentage that would facilitate parking compliance. Parking compliance can come through random inspections. It can come through sometimes frequent, sometimes less frequent, but there needs to be sufficient compliance done and sufficient monitoring done that you do achieve compliance. If it's kind of like, the classic example is if you have a police officer on an overpass on a section of road and you see them maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, you're probably going to go less fast through that corridor every time you go through there because you don't know if they're going to be
I
there.
know, right?
And so,
Yeah, I totally agree. You go to the Civic Center in Hillsborough and you stay there a little bit too long and you
Yeah.
will have a ticket on your windshield.
and so we are having conversations about assuring a certain percentage of that position is dedicated to parking to assure that we have compliance for parking.
Okay. Good, Councilor
Yes.
Martin.
So in the Civic Center too, they're mostly using machines though too, right, to monitor vehicles or not? I don't know.
I don't know.
So, and it's been a few years since I did a ride along with code enforcement, but it seemed to me, if I remember right, the program or equipment or something they used or how they had to do it was cumbersome. Is there a way to look at that and get
So
something more
right
efficient?
now it's a pretty manual system in terms of checking for timed parking. There are some electronic time parking techniques that can be used, but they do require additional investment. Whether it's things that you can put into the pavement, like I think circles or something that can see how long it's occupied. Those are very expensive. Some can be meters, as you mentioned, but you don't have a charge for it, but it can show if it's been, if your time is up, it makes it potentially easier to enforce. A lot of those require capital investment. And typically those capital investments are not in all cases, but in some cases funded by parking revenue.
Well, and I
So-
understand that. How about something
Yeah.
that the person using that's evaluating parking? Is there something?
Yeah,
more
we can look
efficient
at
for them?
the existing method that's being used, and if there's some type of efficiencies that we can find, we can visit with Carol
Because
about
that would be a lot less expensive. Should
Yeah,
anyway.
if there's something there, we can do that.
Okay, so let's move on
Okay.
from the slide. Or what is our thoughts with the
Okay,
2-hour
yeah, I think there's
parking?
probably 5 or 6 more. Next slide, please.
We don't have any consensus on that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just don't think we're going to do it right now. There's not consensus to do it, so that's a no-go.
So this is the fast stop position. Just a little bit about fast stops. We'll get into a little bit of the pros and cons in the next slide, but a little bit of background. They range anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. The top example is used in Portland. The lower example is a very common sign that you'll find in many municipalities. We actually have 2 10-minute stalls. They're right by City Hall. Those are to facilitate paying bills. So we have people that stop there, they come in, they pay their bill, and they leave. They are very high turnover positions. So those were installed intentionally there. Portland, Gene, Corvallis, Bend, they all utilize them in downtown. Typically, they are limited to 1 per block, or in some cases, depending on the configuration of the block, per block face. They're located near businesses that experience a high volume of customer turnover, such as hotels, retail, food. we did, it was kind of interesting. We did a kind of a case analysis of Portland. They require the adjacent businesses to agree to the fast stop stall. So if you have a fast stop stall in front of a business, they ask the neighboring two businesses if they agree with that being a fast stop stall. I'll get into why they probably require that in the next slide. We don't need to necessarily require that. I'm just thought it was kind of interesting. But next slide, please. Some of the pros is it increases turnover and access. It reduces double parking in very high parking areas. It's for easy, rapid access to business. It's good for picking up and dropping off. It's pretty self-explanatory. The cons is it reduces the time parking used for dining and shopping. So in essence, if you have a high turnover position, if you're not there doing something that's high turnover, you can't park there. So it's a reduction of a position for somebody that wants to stay longer than 15 minutes. So you just kind of have to find the right spot. It is kind of difficult to enforce. What we have heard from other places is that sometimes that it's the local businesses that kind of help enforce it. Hey, you've been there too long, or hey, you shouldn't be parking there, or this is a 15-minute stall, or something like that, because it's very difficult to do it on a very short frequency. It does require additional signage, but if we're looking at our overall comprehensive effort, that's why we wanted to address this now, because we could include that as part of a comprehensive signage effort. And then if the spot is full, it can lead to driver circulating until it's open. In other words, if you have two fast parkers that want to park at the same time, the other fast parker is reluctant to find another position. They're going to wait for the 15-minute to come open because it's less time. So they're going to keep circulating around until that position is open. So those are some pros and cons. Next slide, please. So this is certainly welcome council comments on this, but we did kind of take a look at where the downtown parking was. Staff just identified one potential pilot project, fast stop location of 15 minutes. It's in an area that I'm sure everybody knows where that's at. It's basically out in front of Pizza Smizza. It is in an area that is currently marked for no parking. So installing a fast stop stall in that particular location would not take away any parking. It's an opportunity parking position if it wasn't limited to a 15-minute fast stall. But that's what staff was looking at, was trying it out on that corner. The thought was that it's good circulation. It's right there. It's got access to both 21st and to Main, but open to comments. And we're going to get to more parking positions in the next slide, but we would restripe and re-sign this position, essentially commensurate with restriping and signing the other parking positions that you'll see in the next slide. So it'd be all part of this kind of larger effort.
Comments, questions? Yeah, I think it sounds good too, because it's an extra spot, like you're not taking away. So I don't think you need to get adjacent approval because you're creating a spot.
Correct.
15 minutes is long enough to walk.
Yeah, slow rise or the Pizza Smizza or the
For the frame
Mega
shop,
or
that's
the
really
donut,
the
whatever.
upgrade.
Yeah, that's principally why the 15 minutes was centered on. It would give you time to, in theory, walk down the commercial businesses and walk back and do your pickup or delivery and then walk back.
So another
Instead
one,
of 5 minutes.
another one that I was kind of wondering would be on Pacific Avenue, like that First Interstate Bank. They don't use the drive-through anymore, but there's like a yellow strip there. Could that be created and be 15 minutes?
It could, and we're actually on the next slide, we're going to propose that as additional parking. If the
Okay, well,
council
then
would like
just
to
make
make
it
one of
parking.
those spots a 15-minute fast stop,
Sure.
we could certainly look at that as well. I think part of the thought was to try this as kind of a pilot project, see what kind of feedback we get, and then see if we would want to implement it somewhere else. So,
Okay.
Okay, next slide, please.
Yes.
So this is additional parking. So staff kind of took a deep dive, and really you'll see some opportunity on Pacific. Some of these parking spots are a result of the four-way stop that was put in at 21st and Main. It opens up some site windows because now that you have a stop, so we can convert some of those spots. The other ones are along Pacific Avenue, and they are currently, in most cases, painted yellow. In some cases, we knew why they were painted yellow. In other cases, we don't know why they were painted yellow. And in some other cases, it just has striping that wasn't necessarily planned out. So in other words, it might have been striped from one area and then it started in a different area. And so you have some odd striping. So if we make it more consistent, we can find some additional parking. I really want to give a shout out to Greg and Crystal at Public Works. They're the ones that have kind of identified these spots, Greg mostly. But it would result in 16 potential additional spots in the downtown area, which is a pretty significant addition. So when you add that to the
Great.
11 in the Central City lot, that'd be 27 total over the last 5 years. We can incorporate the striping. What it requires to do this is there's both curb striping that is painted yellow, and then there's also, in some cases, striping on the pavement that is white. And in some cases, we would have to do both. In other cases, we would just have to do one. We do have a striping contract. We use the striping contract to do our streets in the summer, in some cases to repaint, curbs. So we would just kind of add this to that contract. I don't know if it would require a budget amendment because we don't have any cost estimates yet. But if it did, we would bring it back as part of the biennial budget. Otherwise, if we can just incorporate it into the contract and there's enough in the biennial budget, we could just do it.
Okay, consensus? I'm here saying, question.
Since you show Mood Cafe, which is Good Mood Cafe on there, can they stripe Pacific to the west of A Street? There's a section there that isn't striped, and I've heard from the business and property owners there that causes vehicles to be kind of elongate the parking there.
So we could take a look at that. If I recall, on the north side of Pacific, west of A, I think there's a TriMet stop that's there.
Yeah, but that's not painted either. So like,
It's
cars-
not.
It's not, and
Yeah.
I've brought this up to you like
Yeah.
5 times probably.
Well, it's on
So that
the south side of Pacific. I think the north side where the TriMet stop is, they're striped on the south side, but they're
it's signed. It doesn't have yellow curbs, Mayor, to your
Striping.
point. And so what you do see is you see some incidental parking there when there's not
Yeah,
a
and then
TriMet bus.
then the
Yeah.
people riding the bus can't get off. But he's staying on the other side of the street by where the dentist office is and
Mhm.
Deaton's
the
office.
cafe,
That's
Yeah.
That's
I
not
know.
striped.
Yeah. Yeah, we can certainly take a look at it. I don't know what striping is there, Councilor Schimel, but we'll take a
It's-
look at it.
Well, I've
No
seen it. There's
striping?
no striping, but the business owners there request striping be added so that parking is more disciplined, so that more people can park to frequent that cafe.
Because some people don't have art.
Yeah.
okay. Cool. This is great. This is really good work. Make sure to thank Crystal and Greg.
Okay. So private parking lots, we actually touched on this a little bit earlier. We have reached out to some private landowners in the downtown area about additional parking. It has not, we just haven't really connected in terms of potentially adding to the parking supply. And so what we're looking at this point is maybe postponing this option until these improvements are made. And maybe there's another parking study that's conducted in the future. What we're really seeing is, I think, if we've pointed out tonight, is pretty heavy usage of the Central City lot, a little bit less in the North lot on A and 21st, and then underutilization candidly of the other parking lots that we have. And I think there's 5 other parking lots. And so none of what we do restricts any private employer from contracting to private owner for a separate use agreement. And I understand, Councilor Marshall, you mentioned, I think that's already occurring.
Yeah.
Private to private contracts, certainly that can still happen. In some of those cases, if it's with a private employer, that may reduce some of the on-street parking. It may even reduce some of this central lot parking. Depends on just what type of agreement it is between private parties. So we have looked at that Wells Fargo North lot that has not very much usage. It's very proximal to the city center. And that's the one that we've made inquiries and just not been successful so far.
I was curious about Pacific University, and I want to give like a little example. So last Friday, just a few days ago, I went and saw the play, right? Catch Me If You Can at Theater in the Grove. There's a staff parking lot right across the street from the theater. So there's no staff at 7:30. So I'm just wondering if there's like a shared use. Okay,
Yeah.
right? So that's an opportune place for someone to park on a Friday night. Okay, Now, pause. 2 weeks ago, I went to watch my nieces play softball at Pacific, and there was a lacrosse game, tennis match, baseball game, and softball game. Okay, so their parking is popping, and our pool is closed, and no one's going there. So we have this lot that's empty, right? So I'm wondering, like, if after hours, when the pool is closed, right? If we say to Pacific, you can use the pool, the aquatics parking lot on off hours, because, and then they say, like, here's this staff parking lot, and after hours, people, it's public. You know what I mean? Like, I would like to see something like that, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I parked in both those locations
Yeah.
on both of those
It's a
examples.
public parking lot.
Well, because I'm like, listen, I know the pool's closed. Like, if I get a ticket, I'm going to say, really? Like,
Yeah.
and then also the play, I'm like, it's right across the street. So I'm just saying, like, I think there's an opportunity for some shared use.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there. Those are my examples.
As it becomes more and more of a problem, there will be, additional restrictions and opportunities to encourage that. I mean, some cities, for example, are starting to impose impervious surface fees. And eventually, as water runoff becomes more and more of a problem, that could be something that the city explores. And one way of maybe, incentivizing shared parking and making sure that your parking is actually like doing something on the, for the benefit of the community is to enter into a shared parking agreement to avoid such fees in the future. Not suggesting that we are at
Yeah.
a place where we would have to impose that right now, but I see a future where that might be something that we need to.
Cool.
Okay. Next slide. So events and closures,
Oh, yes.
there was a previous graphic that showed the number of closures on certain segments of the T in downtown, and then the number of businesses and also the number of storefronts in those same locations. And what the use patterns really show, the current use patterns, is that the street closures occur most often on the streets with the most businesses. If I recall the statistics correctly, on Main Street, it was closed 32 times. And when I say closed to parking, and that was the same street that, if I recall correctly, had 22 storefronts and 19 active commercial businesses, which is the most in the T. Street closures can sometimes they can bring increased foot traffic, which can be good for business. Some street closures can also negatively impact businesses because of a lack of parking and shoppers going elsewhere. In some cases, it depends on the kind of business, it depends on the time and the type of the closure. Staff is actively evaluating placemaking options with the goal of meeting the objectives in the 2040 plan. And really what the objectives in the 2040 plan, there's a number of them that kind of address this, but really what they kind of center on is trying to create a central gathering place in a space that's known, that people are familiar with, that's kind of a go-to spot, if you will, for events. And so kind of has some longevity associated with it. Supporting small businesses, that was a big theme in 2040. And then, of course, increasing events and also foot traffic associated with those events. And so that's, and I think there was maybe mention about a potential work session with the council about this. If the council would like to do that, I think staff could facilitate that. What we would look at is probably bringing some different types of options about, gathering spaces, usage patterns, traffic patterns, because there are certain traffic patterns in certain sections of streets that are more amenable to a closure than other patterns. It just depends on the kind of configuration of the street and also what the traffic impacts are, what the, fire access is in the case of an emergency, those types of things. So with that, that's back to you, Mayor.
Wait, is there any interest in having staff bring back information on this for a work session?
Yeah, absolutely. And if just I only mentioned because it wasn't mentioned in the presentation, if in terms of placemaking, event locations or closures, is considering the central lot as that placemaking or event spot and freeing up all the other parking, creating a space that can be all purpose, parking during the week and being that placemaking.
Yeah, Counselor Falconer had mentioned a while ago too that I don't know what we call it right now, but Site B or the old Times Litho lot, like right now we own that, right? Like right by Growler Garage. That could be the marketplace, like placemaking event in that. I don't know. And then you keep the parking in.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. If there's multiple options that
Yeah, I
we
think
can
the work
evaluate.
session.
But like just figuring out, I mean, because the deal, like what I understand, and I could be incorrect, is like, yeah, you want to have events to bring people downtown, but you have to bring them downtown and increase your capacity downtown, not go to right where the small businesses are and clog it, right? You want to like grow your downtown, and so there's more. It's more vibrant. It's more walk, like you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
yeah,
I'm hearing consensus on a work
okay.
session.
We'd be happy to bring back some characteristics of both those areas and also some kind of characteristics of the existing area and the existing use and patterns from parking lot positions to square feet to access, all of that. So
Well,
we
and I
can bring
think
that back.
university is also something to explore. Like if you want a road, if you want it like on a road going looping around,
Mhm.
there was one storefront on university, right? And then it loops around on a 21st. And then 21st, like, I mean, I don't know. So
Yeah.
with this, I don't know. That's just another. And if the tree, the city tree for the Christmas light is on the corner of 21st and University, that can, you know, and we do ever get funding and can make 21st a festival street. I mean, that was our whole vision of that. So,
So that's College Way, right? And 21st.
wasn't it?
College, yeah, college.
College
and
Way and 21st,
University
where the
is
tree
runs
is.
Between,
Maybe I had the wrong road.
The
street.
tree is-
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
So College Way, 21st.
Yeah, yeah, where the
My
tree,
bad.
the Christmas tree. Yeah.
Mhm.
I just one thing related to if evaluating that central lot is a cost estimate to resurface the lot.
Yeah.
'Cause you
Some
need,
of it's gravel.
You're gonna have to add asphalt anyway behind the theater, and I don't know if that would be part of your theater development is resurfacing that lot, but it just seems like it needs to be re-leveled or ripped out, re-leveled, and resurfaced and make sure it's draining well.
one of the things that,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just add real quick, since you're talking about, you know, potentially a lot of money for that. I mean, I think the URA should have a conversation before about what potentials lie, you know, the existing potential for that site and like the building that we now own, and not just the parking lot, but also the big alley leading to that. Because part of the conversation that we had with the historic preservation architect today when we were walking around is that there's a lot of opportunity there, including for a festival street, and also for redevelopment of the back sides of those buildings, because a lot of those additions were done, you know, long after the original were built. And so I think that, in my mind, that's a much bigger that includes the property that we just bought.
And with that property, if we're looking at putting a hotel there with how many rooms in it, where's parking going to be for those extra 28 rooms that we just put in, and we have 28 more cars coming in to park there? The only thing that stands out to me as more public parking is Site B. Like, it's being used for parking right now for a lot of different things. Like, I'd hate to think we spent that much money on a parking lot.
No,
we should
that
not
is
do
not
it.
my vote.
No, I'm just saying, like, that's what it's being used for right now,
Yeah,
for the most
no,
part, and that's.
But you can, you know, I think Ashland has a boutique hotel in the downtown, and there's no designated parking for that hotel. They actually have two, and one has a little bit of parking and one has none. And I think, you know, people figure it out.
A lot of people who would be using a boutique hotel like that would actually be not renting a car and parking a car.
Yep.
Follow you.
Okay. Well, are we good with this? No, you still have more.
This is the last slide.
Okay, we have 5 minutes and we have
Okay.
a URA meeting.
Okay. Sorry.
6
So
minutes.
just as a reminder, this also has related to parking. But in 2022, there was a preferred alternative for Festival Street that was adopted. This is just kind of a reminder, but also it does point out to some of the potential impacts If this was ever constructed, it would reduce parking from 40 to 33 stalls. This was actually one of the things that precipitated finding the additional spots in the Central City lot, where we got 11 spots. The city is still looking for federal funds. Just as a friendly reminder about the project itself, it was two-way traffic. There was an alternative for one-way traffic. The one-way traffic had, in some cases, angled in parking, which provided more parking. However, it was one way. And so I think the option that was selected by council was to have two-way parking and two-way traffic and parallel parking. The primary part, like if funding was available, if only limited funding was available, was from College to Main. So that corridor, I think, Mayor, that you were referring to earlier, or that connection or nexus at least. The secondary one was from Main to A, and of that, the primary one was between the alley and Main Street. And then, so in a way, the third section was between the alley and A. And just as terms of the characteristic of the overall kind of street, it's a curbless street. It's a flat streetscape. When you see a street like this, you'll recognize it in any downtown. It often has a stamped brick out of concrete. Sometimes it's actual brick. And there is no curb drop off. It could have a lot of amenities along it and so forth. So the reason this was included was it did have an potential effect on parking, but also it's part of that placemaking conversation as well. In terms of what the council may or may not want to do, looking far into the future. So, and this just shows the parking occupancy on 21st and A, just on 21st between College and A. One was a Tuesday, one was a Saturday. And that was designed specifically for the project to try and find what the parking impact may be. And I think that is the last slide.
Great. Cool. You have everything you need from us.
I do. Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor. Thank you,
Cool.
Council.
Thank you. Oh,
Since we had a,
no, we have another meeting.
I understand.
We have another meeting and they have to get done at 9:30. Go ahead, Counselor Schimmel.
So there was a series of public comments that we haven't spoken to, but I just want to make sure Jesse had what information he needed to respond to them. I think some of the responses, the public or the private partnership with other adjacent properties. The other was the reversing from business to parking at night. One mentioned the designated hope lot for homeless overnight camping. If we could evaluate other alternatives for their overnight camping to make that as people feel safer, if that's important. Those are just a couple.
Okay. We're going to adjourn this
Mayor.
work session. Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Forest Grove City Council at 7:04 on April 13th. Will the city recorder please call roll?
Counselor Valenzuela? Here. Counselor Schimmel?
Here.
Counselor Falconer? Here. Counselor Martinez? Here. Counselor Marshall?
Here.
Mayor Wenzel?
Here. We acknowledge the land on which Forest Grove is located rests on the traditional village sites of the Atfalati, a tribe of the Kalapuas who originally inhabited the Tualatin Plains, including Forest Grove. They are now part of the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. Will the council and the audience please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, next on our agenda is item 4, which is our police chief swearing in. So a little bit as our city recorder gets ready, I would like to introduce you to Chief Marzilli. He began his law enforcement career in Oregon, joining the Washington County Sheriff's Office in 1998. Over 28 years, he advanced through the ranks from deputy to commander, serving in patrol, investigations, jail, and professional standards. He is known for building strong teams rooted in trust, communication, and accountability. Forest Grove is so grateful that he accepted this job. So if Police Chief Marzilli can please come up, or soon to be Forest Grove Police Chief, officially sworn in.
I, David Marzilli, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Oregon, the laws and ordinances of the City of Forest Grove, and the rules and regulations of the Forest Grove Police Department. I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Police Chief for the Forest Grove Police Department, to which I have been appointed according to law. Thank you, Henry.
Wait, I'm staying young. Congratulations, Chief Marzilli. Okay, we have 3 proclamations tonight. I'm going to read all of them in English, and then Council President Valenzuela will read the last one in Spanish as well. So we will begin with Arbor Month. Whereas Arbor Day was first observed in 1872 with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas the Forest Grove community continues this tradition of environmental stewardship by conserving, preserving, and restoring our local urban forests. And whereas our community appreciates the many benefits trees provide to our residents, businesses, and visitors. And whereas the National Arbor Day Foundation has recognized Forest Grove as Tree City USA due to our community's commitment to effective forest management over the last year. And whereas calendar year 2025 marked the 36th consecutive year Forest Grove has received Tree City USA designation. And whereas the Forest Grove Community Forestry Commission recognizes the stewardship of the Forest Grove community over the past 36 years to advance the city's urban forestry efforts. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Forest Grove does hereby proclaim the month of April as Arbor Month in Forest Grove, Oregon, and encourages the community to support the spirit and tradition of the first Arbor Day by planting trees for the benefit of our community. Okay, next up is the library. So, whereas libraries spark creativity, fuel imagination, and inspire lifelong, bless you, lifelong learning, offering a space where individuals of all ages can find joy through exploration and discovery. And whereas dedicated library workers provide welcoming spaces that inspire discovery, collaboration, and creativity for all. And whereas libraries provide free and equitable access to books, digital tools, and innovative programming, ensuring that all individuals, regardless of background, have the support they need to learn, connect, and thrive. And whereas libraries protect the right to read, think, and explore without censorship, standing as champions of intellectual freedom and free expression. And whereas libraries, librarians, and library workers across the country are joining together to create National Library Week under the theme, Find Your Joy. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Forest Grove does hereby proclaim April 19th through April 25th as Library Week in Forest Grove, Oregon, and encourages the community to visit the Forest Grove Library and celebrate all the ways the library helps our community find joy. Let's go, libraries. Okay. And now we will move on to Child Abuse Prevention Month, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and Crime Victims' Rights Week. Whereas Oregon sees higher rates of domestic violence, sexual assault, and childhood trauma than the national average. And whereas child abuse and sexual violence are some of the most serious public health issues, with numerous studies documenting the link between trauma and a wide range of medical, emotional, psychological, and behavioral experiences with both short and long-term effects. And whereas children who experience abuse are uniquely affected because they are still developing and therefore suffer lifelong effects to their physical and emotional health. And whereas sexual violence, childhood abuse, and interpersonal crime affect all people but disproportionately affect those impacted by systemic inequities, and whereas when harm does occur, we are determined to respond by helping survivors find not only safety, healing, and justice, but also equitable access to services, a sense of hope for their future, and the tools to rebuild their lives. Now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Forest Grove does hereby proclaim April 2026 and April 19th through April 25th, 2026 as Child Abuse Prevention Month, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and Crime Victims' Rights Week in Forest Grove, Oregon, and reaffirms our commitment to supporting a coordinated and collaborative community of providers that deliver intervention and prevention services of violence and abuse all year long. Thank you. And here's Council President Valenzuela.
Okay, let's see. Proclamación. Considerando que Oregón registra tasas más altas de violencia doméstica, agresión sexual y trauma infantil que el promedio nacional, y considerando que el abuso infantil y la violencia sexual son algunos de los problemas de salud pública más serios y que numerosos estudios documentan el vínculo entre el trauma y una amplia gama de experiencias médicas, emocionales, psicológicas y conductuales, con efectos tanto a corto como a largo plazo. Y considerando que los niños que sufren abuso se ven especialmente afectados porque aún se están desarrollando y por lo tanto sufren efectos permanentes en su salud física y emocional. Y considerando que la violencia sexual, el abuso infantil y los delitos interpersonales afectan a todas las personas, pero afectan de manera desproporcionada a quienes se ven afectados por desigualdades sistémicas. Y considerando que cuando ocurre un daño estamos decididos a responder ayudando a los sobrevivientes a encontrar no solo seguridad, curación y justicia, sino también acceso equitativo a los servicios, un sentido de esperanza para su futuro y las herramientas para reconstruir sus vidas. Ahora, por lo tanto, el Ayuntamiento de la ciudad de Forest Grove, por la presente, proclama el mes de abril de 2026 a la semana del 19 al 25 de abril 2026 como mes de la prevención del abuso infantil, mes de la concientización de la agresión sexual y semana de los derechos de víctimas del delito. En Forest Grove, Oregon, Condado de Washington, y reafirma nuestro compromiso de apoyar una comunidad coordinada, colaborativa, de proveedores que brindan servicios de intervención y prevención de violencia y abuso durante todo el año. En testimonio de lo cual ha sido suscrita la presente y ha hecho que el sello de la ciudad de Forest Grove, Oregon, se emplace este día 13 de abril 2026. Nuestra alcaldesa Melinda Wen.
Thank you, Council President Valenzuela. We are now going to move on to item B on our agenda, but if Chief Marzulli's fan club wants to leave, it's a good time to. Thank you all for coming and supporting him. I mean, really anyone else can leave too, but it's a rip-roaring show, so I mean, you probably want to stay. Okay, item B on our agenda is public comment. Time provided for anyone wishing to speak to City Council on an item not on the agenda or on the agenda but not scheduled for a public hearing. Comments are limited to 2 minutes unless additional time is granted by the presiding officer. The public comment period shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority of councilors present vote to extend the time. Zoom attendees may use the raise hand option to be called on. Let me make sure that's okay. So first up, we have David Dion.
Thank you. By definition, every elected official in the United States was, in fact, elected. But we do not live in a country whose elected officials have unlimited authority. This council cannot violate the Constitution. Anyone on this council, if they should violate the law, would suffer the consequences of their action. Anyone on this council, if they should arrogate to themselves a power or a privilege their position does not grant, would find their decision lacks the force of law. I can say the same thing about state officials. Governor Kotek cannot unilaterally enact a law. Our state legislature cannot countermand the Constitution, either of the United States or of the state of Oregon. Criminal action are investigated. Misuse of government resources carries consequences. All of this is basic civics, but it bears repeating because we are facing a federal government that claims these checks and balances don't apply to the executive branch. It applies the law in an openly partisan manner. The federal government is wrong to do this. No democracy is functional if its laws do not apply equally to all. No democracy is functional if its government is not held to the law. Any effort to prevent the rule of law from applying to the law's enforcers is an attempt to erase democracy. Federal agents will come to court. They will come for benign reasons: taxation, land management, census, disaster relief. All of these are good things. They are things that we need the federal government for. But they will come as well as enforcers for illegal actions of the federal government, regardless of what administration is in power. This happens. The actions of federal agents are not legal simply because they are federal. They are not legal simply because they were commanded by the president. I have asked again and again that the people of Forest Grove be protected. I ask it again today. Enforce the law. Make clear the fact that the law will be enforced equally to all. Be the leaders we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Carol Allery.
This time, I'm coming because I heard you guys are going to be doing fluoride, and we still have fluoride in our water. And I have some concerns. There are good things for fluoride. Yes, there are. But we do live in a country right now that's very rich with people getting children, even poor children, having their teeth taken care of. One of the problems with it, and I gave you everybody I sent an email to, tooth discoloring, that's fine. I don't care about that. Tooth decay, it does weaken enamel. Too much fluoride. How do you determine what too much fluoride is? If I drink 60 ounces or more, sometimes I drink 80 ounces of water, how much fluoride am I getting in those 80 ounces? Skeletal weaknesses. This is very big for people who are elderly. We have a lot of elderly in Forest Grove, and we need to consider that. Joint weaknesses, risk factor, neurological problems. For babies, mothers having babies and being pregnant, there's an impact to young children in the development of the brain. Exposure to fluoride before birth, which leads to poor cognitive outcomes in the future. Higher fluoride levels lead to low scores in IQ tests. Okay, and by the way, if we don't realize, Oregon's like they're at the bottom on this here. High blood pressure. We have significant between high blood pressure and water, which is too much fluoride. Acne, well, I don't know what to say about that one, but seizures. It's not that it causes seizures, but people who are prone to seizures will have that effect. So I have a concern with that, and I wanted to share that concern with you. I hope you consider that when you're looking at your fluoride and down the road and put that to practice. Yes, we know there's good points, but we also have to look at what's bad. And my prayer for you tonight is that you pray for truth and wisdom to guide this council in Jesus' name. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone that's in the audience who did not sign up to give public testimony who would like to do so? Seeing none, is there anyone online, on Zoom, a Zoom attendee who would like to use the raise hand feature to provide public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to now turn it over to, we have a wait, nope, I'm skipping to like 2 items. Let's go back to item C, the consent agenda. Items under the consent agenda are considered routine. They are adopted with a single motion without discussion. Councilors may remove items prior to the motion to adopt. Any removed items are discussed and acted upon following the approval of the remaining items. What is the wish of the council?
Move to approve.
Okay, it was moved by Council President Valenzuela and seconded by Councilor Marshall. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say aye. Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved with a vote of 6-0. Additions and deletions. City Manager, do you have any additions or deletions?
No additions or deletions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any proposed by council? Hearing none. Okay, now we will move on to item E, which is presentations. The council will hold questions until the end of each presentation, and our first presentation is the Family Peace Center update by Rachel Schutz, the Executive Director. Good evening, Rachel.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, great. I'm a little under the weather, so my voice is not the sharpest, but thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You received in your packet our annual report, as you always do, but this one I'm actually really excited about because this is the report that is the final chapter of the Family Justice Center. So I had, myself and staff and board all had a really wonderful time getting to put this together, and it was actually really fun finding all the old pictures. But I'm going to take you through this and then also highlight aspects of Forest Grove at the end. So the first part, just highlighting that the reason that the Family Justice Center came to be in the first place was an experiment that was put together by the chief of police of Hillsborough at the time, back in 2013, 2014. He took one of his officers and said, I want you to go around to all the places in Washington County that you would need to go if you were escaping domestic violence. And I want you to take your children with you, and I want you to use public transportation. And as the story goes, it took her a day and a half, and she came back to the chief and said, it's not possible to do that. I can't get all the places that I need to go. I can't make all the times that I need to be there. My kids are hungry. This is too hard to do. And he took that experience and he brought it to the community and said, we need to do something better for survivors. I'm really attached to that story because I wholeheartedly believe that it is the responsibility of service providers to navigate themselves, not make the people that are seeking services navigate them. It's not their job to figure out how to jump through all the hoops. We're the ones that are paid to do that. And so that's how the Family Justice Center started, was a community that said, we need to do something different for survivors. And then they actually did. That's what makes me so excited about this organization and everything that we've done, is that commitment to not only doing things better for our community, but doing it together. And so over the years, in total, we served over 31,000 survivors with over 54,000 services, which is incredible to look back on. I'm going to jump to 2025. So in 2025, you can see up here, we got much more colorful with our graphs this year. We provided over 12,500 services to a little over 6,000 survivors. And what we broke out this year was the kinds of services that they received. We've done that a little bit before, but we really wanted to highlight those items for you guys. And so one of the interesting things is our top 3 services. this year in 2025, above all other years, it was basic needs that were the highest needed service. So food, clothing, and basic need supplies such as hygiene items, emergency items, things like that. That went above and beyond even our confidential advocacy services, which are our agencies like the Domestic Violence Resource Center, Sexual Assault Resource Center, folks like that. That really showed the pressure and stress that is on communities. You guys know that, you hear about it all the time. But one of the interesting things that happened with our data is this was the first year that we saw a dip in the number of survivors that were coming to the center, with the exception of 2020. And we looked back, as executive directors, we actually met and we looked back at our data and we said, what's going on? Because this is the first year that we've seen a precipitous drop off. And what had happened, we went back month by month and we saw a big dip in the number of people that were coming in when immigration enforcement increased in our communities. And so, and it wasn't just people coming into the Family Justice Center. It was people calling crisis lines. It was even people going to the hospitals. We reached out to community organizations around us and asked them what was going on. We reached out to other counties. It was the first time that any of us can remember that we not only had open shelter beds, there were some shelters that were empty. And so that made a huge impact on our community. The other really interesting thing that happened is even though our services dipped, or the number of people that came in dipped, the number of services that were accessed by each survivor increased. So what we were actually seeing is people that were able to come in, or people that we were able to reach, they had higher needs. And we're seeing that now as we transition into the Family Peace Center, which we'll talk about a little bit. But as we transition in, there are more and more needs that are emerging in our community. And that's something that I'm sure you guys are seeing too. That's happening all over, not just our county, but the state and the rest of the country. Is the needs are going up and the resources are actually going down. So something that you guys are also well aware of is the amount of funding cuts that happened to a lot of community-based organizations. And that doesn't make need go down. That just makes needs spread out more in more concentrated measures in the agencies that were fortunate enough to stay open. So that's also something that we are experiencing. So go ahead and scroll down. From 2018 to 2025, like I said, we served over 31,600 individuals that came into the Family Justice Center with 54,000 services. So as you can see, what I was just highlighting, 2025 was the first year that we actually saw that dip outside of 2020, which was really remarkable for us. But what was also very interesting is you can see that really large gap between the number of services provided and the number of people served. We actually like to see that. We want to make sure that people are getting multiple services for every time they come into the Family Justice Center. In fact, in 2025, our top 3 services, so basic needs, advocacy, and legal support, that represented 7 different agencies. So that represented 7 different locations that people didn't have to go anymore, which is also an exciting thing for us. I pulled out on our next page, I pulled out some of our data around some of the most utilized services. So that's nerdy stuff that I'm really interested in. But one of the things that I got really excited about was that idea of co-location. So that big bottom number, 38,071, is the number of services that were accessed at the Family Justice Center that without the Family Justice Center were in other locations. And so those were delivered by agencies. 38,000 services were delivered by agencies that were previously located in other places. So that's 38,000 times people didn't have to go to another location. And that's something that I get really excited about, which starts to tell the story and show what the value of having agencies work together and work together in the same space is. Then I have a story that you guys can read, but I'll just highlight. This person's name is Lisa. Lisa means a lot to me. I've known Lisa since I started. And Lisa has been on a really long journey with the Family Justice Center and now the Family Peace Center with her and her children. And that picture at the bottom, I actually took both of those pictures, but that picture at the bottom is at her college graduation at Lewis and Clark. And she, last Thursday, took her LSATs at the Family Peace Center, which was just an incredible thing. And she is going to be a family law attorney and hopefully a judge in the future so that she can help other survivors in the same situation that she was in, navigating the legal system. And so it's just that means a lot to me. I've watched her kids grow up, and it's just incredible that we get these opportunities through a center like this to be able to see people come through their full journey. Lastly, I have some incredibly lovely pictures, and I'll just highlight. This is from back in 2015, the original steering committee, and then pictures of the planning committee, our law enforcement steering committee, many of those law enforcement folks you may recognize still being here, the Boys and Girls Club donating art, and then the ribbon cutting at the first Family Justice Center. So that was just some fun things that we took a look at. And then the next one is the construction of the Family Peace Center pictures. And so that was just when we were searching for the building, doing a demo day celebration and then actual demo. We didn't do much with those hammers that we tried working on. And then our opening day, which was January 21st, 2026. Since we opened on January 21st, as of the end of last week, we'd already had more than 1,200 people walk into the facility, which is only 2.5 months worth. So our volume of individuals coming through is very high, which is very good. And at the same time, like I tell you guys every year, it's hard to be in that position of seeing an increase year over year over year. But I'm actually more concerned when we see those dips, like I mentioned earlier. Sorry. So for Forest Grove in 2025, we served 88 individuals with 182 services. I took a look at so far in the 2.5 months that we've been operating. We've already seen 32 individuals from Forest Grove, which means we're on track to more than double the amount of people from Forest Grove that are receiving services. Just this month, we've seen 3 families from Forest Grove for CARES Northwest alone. And I was thinking about that as I was coming over here. That's a really spectacular thing, because I know I live here in Forest Grove, and I know if I'm trying to get out to Northeast Portland, particularly for a morning appointment, it's going to take me about 2 hours. And so that is a huge accomplishment to have something like that, something so critical, be right here within travel distance of our community. I wanted to give you guys an update that you were very generous in giving the Family Peace Center a grant this year, which is great, to do outreach for Forest Grove. And so far, we've connected with Gigi's House, St. Vincent de Paul, Centro for the new leadership of the community and senior center, and Taste and See Local. I had a great time at Taste and See Local, actually. And also our library. We have a great relationship with the library. I love Bob, and we're going to do another community event over there here soon, which is fantastic. But that was exciting for me to see that already we're so high in the number of Forest Grove individuals that we're serving. Like I said, based on the rate that we're at now, we'll more than double what we saw in 2025 for individuals in Forest Grove that are receiving services. So that was a lot of information and data. Happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just have a comment, Mayor.
Go ahead,
if I
Council
may.
President.
The story of Lisa was amazing and very moving. And I want to thank you for the work that you do, because that story and many other stories with these wonderful outcomes are possible.
They are possible.
You know, when people focus on things like they shouldn't be riding the bus to get everywhere, it's not possible. And just pinpointing to those, logistic problems that people may have that prevent them from seeking a safer place for themselves and for their children. So by you providing that, you make all this possible. And I want to really say thank you. Thank you to you for the work you do.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would just like to echo Council President's comments. You know, thank you. Thank you so much for the work you do. And congratulations. It is a success story. You know, helping one individual is a success story, but 31,000 people and, you know, really continuing to help and see like, asking that question, why are we seeing the dip, the outreach, the support? You know, Forest Grove is lucky to have you as a partner. So we just say thank you. Thank you for doing this incredibly hard work, but rewarding as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Just one more thing, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yes, a few years ago, you had an activity
Yeah.
where participants of your program painted, and they were brought to the library to exhibit. And I just wonder if that could be done again in the future, because I think it's very important for the community to be aware of, you know, these things going on, these things happening. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open. There's probably someone you can help out and reach out to. So I think that that was a great activity, and I would love to see it again, you know, in the future.
Thanks for saying that. Actually, Bob and I talked about that, and he's remodeled the area where we had the original exhibit. And he was like, we have way more room for art this time. And so I would love to do it. And I'll just mention it is April. So thank you so much, Mayor, for the proclamation. This year, the Voices of Hope Gallery is actually at the Reeser. And so that's actually going to be going through May 18th. And if anybody would like to go, some incredible work is there. And I would also really like to invite all of you to our grand opening of the Family Peace Center on the 30th. So that's going to be Thursday, April 30th at 5 o'clock. And we would love to have you guys there to see this whole center. But yes, I think the art is absolutely a thing that we can bring back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you all so much.
I hope you feel better. Thanks for coming, even though you're under the weather. Committed, dedicated.
You guys are my favorite.
Okay, our next presentation is from the Library Commission Annual Report. Hi, Morgan. And Colleen's coming up as well.
Thank you all so much for having me here for in recognition of National Library Week and as an opportunity to share with you a little bit about the Library Commission, the work we've been doing, and what's ahead for us in 2026. So I am going to be sharing our annual report and our newly adopted goals with you tonight, and happy to answer any questions as well. I always like to start with a couple quotes. You all may remember this from last year. This year I was thinking a lot about the theme about find your joy at the library and the creativity and imagination that it sparks. So my quotes are related to that. We read to know we are not alone, C.S. Lewis said. Libraries store the energy that fuels the imagination, from Sidney Sheldon, and reading gives us some place to go when we have to stay where we are. Coolly. The Library Commission currently is composed of myself as chair, Pam Bailey, vice chair, who you know is truly committed because she is here in the room tonight, even though she's not giving this presentation. Lauren Miller is our secretary, Kathleen Polson, Kirsten Beyer, and Colleen Lord, as well as our council liaison, Mariana Valenzuela. We're so lucky to have her. You all know from multiple events like the gathering of the groups that we are not the only supporters of the library. One of the ways that makes our library in our town so amazing is that there are so many groups of dedicated folks in town who give their free time and their passion to this amazing institution that we have. So ourselves from the Library Commission, we also have the Friends of the Forest Grove Library, the Forest Grove Library Foundation, you all, the Forest Grove City Council, and a wide range of community patrons and volunteers and philanthropists who help in all the ways that they can and help our members of our community find their joy here in our amazing building and with our amazing librarians. So, how does the Library Commission fit into that little ecosystem of library groups? We have a couple of specific charges from the city that I will go through quickly for you all. We advise the City Council on matters pertaining to the Forest Grove City Library. We also advise the library director on matters affecting the operations of the library. We advise, review, and approve library policies if they need to be changed, and then we would forward to you all for adoption. We facilitate community involvement and input on the operations and policies of the library. We also participate and cooperate with WCCLS, the Washington County Cooperative Library Services program that we operate underneath. And we participate and cooperate with the Friends of the Forest Grove Library and the Library Foundation, of course. So what's new at the library? You all had the opportunity to hear from Colleen in October, but even in that short amount of time until now, there's a lot of exciting new stuff at the library that I wanted to make sure you all have seen, and if not, encourage you to go down and check out. We have a refreshed children's area. That children's area came about in part because of a donation from a member of the community, a bequest from a member of our community, and then additional funds provided generously by the foundation. We also have a refreshed fireplace area, which is looking amazing, and still more to come there, which was predominantly from the generosity, of the foundation, and we're so thankful for them for that. We also have new open and closed signage that you can see from the outside, and is very exciting, I think, for lots of folks. I've been wanting it for a long time. And that is not all. We also have 2 new folks at the library. A new reference supervisor, Jack Buck, who's just joined us recently from Michigan, and a new youth services librarian, Amanda Woods, who is just barely started her job and already making a great impression, and we're really excited to have both of them on staff. Just an opportunity to highlight another great partnership that the library has, and relationships they're building with our community, is to highlight all the many ways that Pacific University students, of course, very close to my heart, are involved with the library right now. The library has 10 work study students employed there from Pacific University this year. It's been a long-term partnership, but that is an incredible number. So many of our young people are having the opportunity to spend really valuable time interacting with community members in that library setting. They also host field study students from our nonprofit, Masters of Nonprofit Leadership degree right now, got volunteers, and multiple art classes over the last couple of semesters have been partnering with the library. You can see that group right there with some of the examples of their work behind them, but there's also larger projects that they've been working on and some exciting new projects that are coming soon. So look for new art in the library from our Pacific students. So I've got a lot of goals, and they're all very wordy, and I've tried to keep it short for you all for 2026, but I'm happy to expand on any of them if you're interested. So we always are continuing to provide input on library staff's current projects and needs. This year, for the first time, we have a new goal. We're actually going to review the library's mission. It's been over 10 years, I believe, since the mission has been looked at, and we just want to make sure that it's still aligned with their vision and the work that they're doing day to day. So that's one of our efforts. We're also going to be inventorying and reviewing all of the policies. It's been on our radar for a while. We've kind of started that process, but this is the year we're going to get it done. So there's a chance you'll be seeing more information from us if we decide that there are policies that do need revision and updates. Because there's so much new activity happening at the library, all these new spaces, we're also going to work with the library staff to conduct a user survey and try and get some feedback in this current moment about how folks are using the library and what they would like to see there. We're really going to take a look also at the commission's kind of like presence and awareness in the community. We have a couple of specific goals around that. For example, we want to get up to full membership at the commission. We're down one person, and we have a couple of in-progress applications right now. We're really interested in filling the student position on our commission that's been vacant for a couple of years, so going to start doing some outreach for that. And we also want to just review all the web pages on the library's page and on the city's site and things like that to make sure that it's all as fully transparent and welcoming and informative for folks who might be interested in the commission and the work that all of the different groups related to the library are doing right now. We're not done yet, I'm afraid to say. We're looking at art in the library, thinking about how we can develop guidance for public art accession and de-accession and display within the library. We are, of course, celebrating National Library Week happening next week, including library appreciation, and there's going to be some public-facing opportunities for folks who want to come in and contribute to thank yous to our librarians and some opportunities to write about how you find your joy in the library, things like that. So look for that coming soon. We'll be hosting the gathering of the groups again this year, so we will be sending invitations when we get close to that point. Of course, supporting the Friends and Foundation, staying engaged with ongoing WCCLS structure and governance and funding decisions that are being made at that county level that might impact us here in Forest Grove, and looking for ways to stay engaged and participating in the further work that is to come around the city's Vision 2040 project and how the library and the commission can plug into that. To that end, we are really looking at how the library can contribute to the goal of having an engaged and connected Forest Grove community with inclusive spaces for all. And we are already looking at ways that is showing up in the library and in the way our citizens support it and use it. Of course, very exciting that the library levy did pass in the last election and the opportunities that provides us possibly for expanding services. But of course, all day, every day, the library is serving as a gathering space for our community and a wide range of volunteers, and thinking about how we can be a partner with community groups and other libraries outside of us, like the Pacific Library, the high school library, things like that, to grow and expand that impact as an inclusive gathering space here in town. So you can help. You can always volunteer if that is your jam. We have 2 book sales already on the calendar from the Friends. One is coming very soon, May 13th, 16th, and then October 19th through 26th. You're always welcome to join a library program. There's some really interesting new adult programming from Bob and their team over there. For example, there's a really cool kind of crafting event happening on April 18th. You can sign up for the library's monthly email newsletter if you're not already signed up for that and want to stay engaged. Watch for your invitation to the gathering of the groups. Ensure your constituents here in Forest Grove know that there are library services available and sometimes things that they might not think of. For example, the librarians provide free on-site notary services to anyone who would like to access that, as well as printing and tax forms, all sorts of good things like that. And then also know that there are policies to support the library and our citizens and to ensure there is something for everyone at our amazing library. And the librarians and the commission and all of us involved really do want to hear from our citizens and from our elected officials and anyone who's interested. If you have ideas or concerns and you want to talk to us about anything, that's exactly what we're here for. So thank you is generally the theme of what brings me here today. To our, thank you to our tremendous library staff and all the good work they do, to my fellow library patrons and supporters who show up in all the ways that they do, and of course to you all and the very important and supportive role you play on the City Council in this town. So I appreciate you and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Morgan. Any questions or comments for Morgan? No, I would just like to say thank you. I mean, there's so many, like you and Pamela, like so many wonderful volunteers who show up for the library, but also show up and serve the community in so many ways. And so just really grateful that we have such a great community that supports each other. So thanks. I mean, and Colleen does a great job of bringing you all together and facilitating and showing up herself. So I think we're just really lucky.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. And we have another commission update from our Community Forestry Commission in their annual report. And we have Dan Reardon and the chair, Mark Nakajima, coming up, I believe, to present. I feel like, Mark, you've been the chair the whole time I've been on council.
I have not been the chair, actually. I have been on the commission forever, but I have not been the chair that often, to be honest.
Pleased to say that Mark has been on the commission from day one.
Are you a founding member?
Yeah, I was actually, I predate the commission. I was on the tree task force that culminated in forming a forestry commission. So
how long ago?
I'm very close to being older than dirt right now.
We need dirt for trees, so there we go.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Mark has a day job, so I volunteered to kind of take the lead on this, and Mark is here to answer questions and interject his thoughts. But we do have a brief presentation for you this evening. The first purpose of tonight's presentation is just basically to update the City Council on the Community Forestry Commission highlights for calendar year 2025 and the Commission priorities for calendar 2026. The Forestry Commission serves basically three fundamental primary functions. One is to serve as the official tree board for Tree City USA qualification, and as you heard in the proclamation, we achieved 36 years as being a Tree City USA community. The Forestry Commission also oversees the city's register of significant trees. The Forestry Commission periodically holds public hearings to consider removals from the register and makes recommendations to City Council on addition. And the Forestry Commission also makes recommendations to the City Council on general forestry-related matters, such as increasing the city's urban tree canopy, which we'll highlight a little bit later. Next slide, please. So this, the Forestry Commission relates to one 2040 Forest Growth Forward goal area, and that's community growth. And it's related to building and maintaining a resilient, efficient, and financially sustainable infrastructure. And the urban forestry can be thought of as being infrastructure. Trees serve a specific purpose. They achieve many goals and objectives, and it is certainly green infrastructure in the community. And so what the Forestry Commission does is, related to their efforts, expands the green infrastructure in the community and makes Forest Grove more climate resilient. So in terms of 2025 highlights, the Forestry Commission held the Arbor Month tree planting at Thatcher Park in April 2025. It was a beautiful day, as you'll see on the next slide. But in addition to the Arbor Month tree planting, the Forestry Commission also began work on updating a Tour of Trees map guide for Old Town Forest Grove. It's a map guide that has been very popular, but it was in need of updating. So that's been a priority over the last calendar year, moving into this calendar year. And then again, as you heard in the proclamation, the city achieved Tree City USA designation for year 36. Slide, please. So these are just a couple of photos of the Arbor Day tree planting at Thatcher Park. We partnered with the city's Parks Department, and shout out to Tom Martin, who helped, and his team planting the trees at Thatcher Park. So this is just an image of the draft Tour of Trees map guide. One of the Forestry Commission members, Sachi Arakawa, has taken the lead on it, and she's been going through with the help of the commission to identify where trees that were in the prior map guide are no longer there, and also discussing additional trees to add to the Tour of Trees map guide. And this just shows kind of a concept of what it'll look like once it's. Slide, please. So another accomplishment during 2025 was that the Forestry Commission partnered with the city's Light and Power Department to review permits for removal of dangerous trees affecting overhead power lines, specifically in Old Town. There are a number of trees that are causing problems, the Oregon white oak trees in particular, and you can see from this image how close some of those trees are to the overhead power lines. And so the Light and Power Department has been working with property owners, the owners of some of these Oregon white oak trees, to remove them. And if they're on the city's register of significant trees, it has to go to the Forestry Commission for public hearing and a decision. Several of those happened over the course of 2025. And And then this slide just shows the 2026 priorities for the commission. And I'll just turn it over to Mark real quickly if you want to go over the priorities that the commission is
So
working on.
we're going to complete the tour of trees, and as Dan said, Sachi is really taking it under her wing and is doing a really super job building that brochure. So that should be good. She's also going to help us with in a citywide tree canopy assessment, and so we look forward to finding out about that. The annual Arbor Day tree planting will be this Thursday at 10 a.m. at Lincoln Park. I was going to comment on the picture of last year's planting. We made sure we adhered to city procedure. You'll notice that everybody was standing there and shovels in the ground, but nobody using them. No, I'm just kidding. Prepare and submit a Tree City USA application for 2026. We really partner with the Parks and Recreation Commission on tree-related matters. Evaluate the city's 2016 Urban Growth Management Plan for updating, improve outreach and communications on urban forest-related matters. One other comment I was going to make about 2025 is that there was a fair amount of activity in the town center on Main Street and surrounding streets where trees were over mature, causing problems, and so there was a large replacement program, not necessarily totally under the Forestry Commission, but I think as a commission we recognize that early on there was a lot of interest in making sure we plant trees because we thought we needed more trees, and maybe not a lot of thought to the life of the tree and what maintenance goes into that. So we do have an urban forest management plan, and I think you've seen some of the results of replacement trees and how we want to approach that.
So that sums up the Forestry Commission accomplishments for 2025 and priorities for 2026. We'd be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
When do you expect the map guide of the trees to be completed and published?
We're hoping we meet on Wednesday. We'll take a look at another version, and I'm not sure how long it will take us to finish that, but we probably by mid-year, if not sooner.
All right, thank you.
If it's completed this year, then that's something that we can use for Tree City USA qualification as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. And I think it's something, for tourism or for community members, I think it'd be really cool if you all, I don't know, if maybe we worked with the PAC and the chamber and it was like trees and art. We have murals, we have trees and a scavenger hunt. And then they complete it and they take to the chamber and they get like a treat. Get it? Trees, art. Never mind. You have to explain
like a
it. It's
teacher.
not that good. Yeah, it's not that good. But I think it's a great idea. And I think that, having people walk around and and I don't know if we can use TLT funds. I don't know. Just some ideas of really, having an identity to bring people and say hey, spend the day in Forest Grove and put nature and art together or grab a bite. I don't know. I'm just looking for ways to bring people in the Grove, but,
That's an excellent segue to one of my notions. Part of the Main Street tree replacement, I've suggested that maybe some of those locations aren't appropriate for a tree. That's why we have problems. And I've suggested they would be great places for public art.
Right.
So I'm hoping that we would see some public art on Main Street or surrounding streets where the trees used to be.
Mm-hmm. I think PAC is discussing that. And I don't know if you know this as well, but the council did put some of our TLT funds into public art, right? And so I think you have a council that supports, I don't want to speak for the council, but yeah, agreed. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, gentlemen. It was a great presentation. Dan has another presentation after this, but Mark, you're free to go.
Okay.
Unless you want to stay for the comprehensive plan update.
I've
You've
done
had your
enough.
share of that when you were on planning.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our final presentation of the evening, which is on the comprehensive plan.
So thank you, Mayor, members of the council, Dan Reardon with the Planning Division. So this is Comprehensive Plan Part 2. I'm happy to be here this evening to advance this project. We'll dive right into it with how this particular project dovetails with Forest Grove Forward Vision 2040. And it's very clear. Action 2.8 is simply update the city's comprehensive plan. And so that's why we're before you this evening. Next slide. So the purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide just a brief recap of the comprehensive plan presentation provided to City Council on March 9th. And that's more for the audience, the general public, so that they have some context in terms of what this presentation is all about. And then another purpose is to present the staff's recommended approach for City Council consideration, the approach for updating the city's comprehensive plan, and then also providing an opportunity for City Council to discuss next steps. So before I get into this slide, I just want to give a shout out to Jamie Zake in the city manager's office, who did an excellent job preparing these graphics. They were much better than the ones that I had, and we really appreciate it. So hopefully this is more legible. So this slide is basically just to show how the comprehensive plan relates to other policies, regional policies and state policies above the comprehensive plan, which is shown in green on this slide. But all of this basically dovetails from constitutional and federal requirements. So the more regional and state federal policies are above the comprehensive plan, and then flowing out of the comprehensive plan are the local development codes. So the comprehensive plan provides the basis for the city's zoning map and the city's development code. And both of them are used to review land development applications, to determine whether or not particular activities are allowed in certain parts of the community. And then so hopefully at the end of the day, we have happy, satisfied community members that have a clear understanding of what the direction is for city growth within the long term, within the next 20 years. So with that, the comprehensive plan is a 20-year roadmap. The 20 years is very important because that comes out of state law. We're obligated under state law to have a comprehensive plan that directs community growth over a 20-year time frame. So the comprehensive plan is a 20-year roadmap based on the community's vision, guiding how the community's vision for growth is achieved. Next slide, please. So in terms of the road forward with updating the comprehensive plan, a little bit of history. The first comprehensive plan for the city was adopted in 1982. I should say the first comprehensive plan in compliance with Senate Bill 100, which was the landmark Oregon land use planning bill. The comprehensive plan adopted in 1982 was done to comply with Senate Bill 100 in the late 70s and early 80s. Back in 2007, there was a community vision statement that was adopted with a lot of community input, and that provided the basis for the current comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2014. So it's been quite a while now, a little over 10 years, and so things have changed since then. As this council will recall, back in 2025, not that long ago, Forest Grove Forward 2040 was adopted. So updated the community's vision statement that was adopted way back in 2007. And so Forest Grove Forward will provide the basis for the next comprehensive plan update, which we would hope to have, if things move forward as planned, updated and adopted by 2028, so 2 or 3 years. So the comprehensive plan, in addition to showing how the community's growth vision can be achieved, also demonstrates compliance with the statewide Oregon land use planning goals, as well as the Metro 2040 growth concept. There are 19 statewide land use planning goals, 14 of which apply to cities within the Portland region. The slide shows some elements of the statewide land use planning goals. One is to consider the past, present, future uses of Oregon's natural resources. It's often thought of that the statewide land use planning goals deal specifically with urbanization, but they don't. Fundamentally, it's to protect natural resource lands, agricultural lands in particular. But the statewide land use planning goals also provide guidelines and framework for local land use plans, and that's most important for us. And then the statewide land use planning goals also articulate the mission of the Department of Land Conservation and Development, the state land use planning agency. Next slide, please. So the comprehensive plan is influenced by a number of things. One is the city council goals and Forest Grove Ford. That's the primary influence, as well as the Oregon planning rules. But other things that are considered would be the urban reserve concept plan for the David Hill Urban Reserve area, how that could affect the direction in terms of how the community grows. The Metro Regional Transportation Plan is an influence. Clean water services plans for trunk lines, sewer lines, and sewer treatment facilities. The Metro planning rules, another influence, and the Oregon climate rules, the climate-friendly and equitable communities rules that forced us to update our development code. That's another influence. Next slide. So the plan is not done in a vacuum. State planning rules and best practices require that proposed changes to the plan undergo review by multiple stakeholders and reviewing agencies, and these are shown on the slide. Reviewers include the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. Metro plays a role, the City Council, of course. The Planning Commission makes recommendations to City Council on comprehensive plan revisions, and then community members and special interest groups are also given an opportunity to weigh in on recommended policies that would be included in the comprehensive plan. Under state law, the city is required to provide formal notice to the state, Oregon Land Conservation and Development, and Metro as well, so that they can make formal comments on the plan. So it's pretty regulated in terms of how the plan is reviewed as things move. So again, this is from the prior presentation. This basically just shows the 11 chapters that are included in the comprehensive plan. And the way the 2014 comprehensive plan was structured is that it's really based on each individual statewide land use planning goal. Community sustainability was an important consideration when we were updating the comprehensive plan previously. That's related to a number of Oregon land use planning goals, not just one in particular, but that is a key element in the comprehensive plan. So in terms of different elements of the components of the comprehensive plan, as we discussed at the last presentation, the city is required to do a housing capacity analysis. It's currently underway. In fact, we have our first project management team meeting scheduled for this Wednesday. And we are required under state rules to have the housing capacity analysis updated and adopted by December 2027. And the housing capacity analysis includes several different requirements, including a community engagement, preparing a housing needs assessment, doing a buildable land inventory, a development-ready lands analysis, and a residential land supply and demand reconciliation. When all of this is done, once the housing capacity analysis is adopted, that will feed into developing housing production strategy that will specifically identify how the city intends to meet the state housing targets that are assigned to the city of Forest Grove. So that will be a second step in all of this after December. Slide, please. So in terms of other plan components, in addition to what is now the housing capacity analysis, used to be called the housing needs analysis, we have the transportation system plan, the economic opportunities analysis. Next slide. The Parks and Recreation master plan, the water system master plan, the wastewater system master plan, the historic resources inventory, which, as you heard in the prior work session this evening, was last updated. The comprehensive plan was updated in 2023 to include the downtown historic district. And then the local wetland inventory is also part of the plan. And each one of these things come forward to the city council for review and adoption in some manner. In terms of the current status, the last housing needs analysis was adopted in 2019. We're obligated to have a housing capacity analysis done in 2027. The transportation system plan was adopted in 2013, just prior to the 2014 comp plan being updated. Our update is scheduled to begin in the not too distant future based on state funding, probably after 2027. The economic opportunities analysis was just recently adopted in 2025, will likely be next updated in 2030. The Parks Master Plan is planned to be updated in 2026, 2027. The Water Master Plan was just recently adopted in 2022. Next update will be 10 years after 2022 and 2030. The wastewater stormwater master plan was adopted quite a while ago in 2007. The update is scheduled to begin in 2027. As I mentioned, the local historic resources inventory was updated in 2023. And then our local wetland inventory was adopted in 1993 and reviewed in 2011 as part of the last comprehensive. So with all of that background and information, staff has come up with a recommendation for City Council consideration on how to advance this project. And the recommendation is to issue a request for proposals to retain a qualified comprehensive planning consultant to support the update of the city's comprehensive plan. This would provide for an independent sort of arm's length review of the current comprehensive plan to help guide us through the process of doing a comprehensive plan evaluation and making recommendations to City Council on a scope of work for the comprehensive plan update. And the scope of work could include identification of specific plan sections requiring revision to ensure alignment with the 2040 vision plan, the City Council action plan, and other established community priorities. The scope of work would also include development of a sequencing strategy for projects related to implementation of the 2040 vision plan. Scope of work would include creation of a community engagement methodology. There are specific things that we need to do under state law related to community engagement as part of a comprehensive plan update. And then the scope of work would also include identification of the appropriate state review and approval process. There's a lot that goes into a comprehensive plan update, and so the planning consultant would help us navigate all of these different elements and come up with a cohesive strategy for moving forward. The planning process will include council work sessions at key milestones to further refine the scope as needed, provide policy direction to staff, and guide the overall approach for the comprehensive plan update. So there will certainly be a role for the city council to guide the process as things move. So the council may recall that the comprehensive plan update is budgeted at about $150,000 for fiscal year 26-27, specifically to hire a consultant. And the recommended path forward on the previous slide builds on recent experience from other cities and counties that have recently completed comprehensive plan updates, such as the city of Milwaukee and Wasco County. The path forward also considers the requirements of the Oregon land use planning process, which is fairly complex, and the complexity stemming from the comprehensive plan's diverse and interrelated components. And it's that interrelatedness that makes things more complex and where we really need to dive into what a efficient path forward might be part of the value. So that's the staff's formal presentation for the comp plan update this evening. I'd be happy to open it up to any questions that the city council might have at this time, and we'll take it from there.
Great, thanks, Dan. Any questions, comments? Do we think 150,000 is sufficient? Do we don't think we need a budget? Yeah. Do we think 150,000 in the budget sufficient for the consultant?
I think for fiscal year 26-27, it should be adequate, but there'll be another budget. In the new biennial budget the following year, there'll be another request.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, it sounds like I agree with the recommendation. I think that it's a big project. We need to update it. We want it done really intentionally, and we don't think there's just so much capacity you all have in community development. So I think hiring a consultant's the way to go. And I see heads nodding, so I think we're good. Okay, great. Thank you, Dan. Wait, I don't think you're going anywhere.
No, not going to.
Wait, we're going to switch agenda items, but poor Dan is in the hot seat. And bye to the Library Commission members. Thank you. Lynn's out of here too. He's like, I'm out too. Peace out. Okay, we're going to move on to item F, public hearings, ordinances, and resolutions. And we're going to have resolution 202612 adopting amended urban planning area agreement between the Washington County and City of Forest Grove and repealing resolution number 201875.
So the draft, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, Dan Reardon again. You have a copy of the draft resolution in your packet this evening, as well as a staff memo providing some detail about what the urban planning area agreement is and why it's being updated. I also have a PowerPoint presentation, agenda item as well. One of the reasons for the PowerPoint presentation is that there's some maps that are being updated and the graphic images help communicate what's being done. But I'll get into the purpose and the background and what the amendments are. This agenda item also addresses a Forest Grove Forward goal related to community growth, related to envisioning a well-connected, safe, and environmentally sustainable community with diverse, affordable housing, resilient green infrastructure, efficient mobility options, and strong public safety, creating a vibrant, accessible, and climate-conscious community for all. And the urban planning area agreement, as I'll get into, is specifically related to also the Oregon land use planning goals as well as the comprehensive. So the purpose of tonight's presentation is to give City Council an opportunity to consider a resolution related to revisions to the urban planning agreement already adopted by the Washington County Board of County Commissioners. The UPAA identifies roles and responsibilities for land use planning activities within the urban growth boundary that may impact both Washington County and the city. And as the council knows, the urban growth boundary includes unincorporated areas that are still under county jurisdiction that will ultimately be annexed into the city of Forest Grove for urbanization. And so there's definitely coordination that needs to happen between the county and the city as land use activities move forward. But I do want to emphasize that the required actions in the UPAA are not policy related, they're ministerial in nature. It basically gets into details about how notification will be provided, how the urban planning areas are modified, what happens when annexation occurs. The Planning Commission reviewed the revised UPAA on March 2nd, 2026, and unanimously recommended that City Council adopt a resolution accepting the revisions and authorizing the city manager to sign the revised UPAA on the city's behalf. Next slide. So the first UPAA was adopted back in 1988, a few years after the 1982 comprehensive plan was adopted. The most recent amendment to the UPAA was in 2018, and it specified that all future urbanized areas after 2010 must be governed and urbanized by a city. And so those unincorporated areas inside the UGB adjacent to the city of Forest Grove, in order for urban development to occur, they have to be annexed into the city. The UPAA, other cities in the county also have UPAAs, and part of this was related to not perpetuating things like Bethany or Aloha, having urbanized unincorporated areas. So moving forward, urbanization has to occur within a city. The 2018 update also added wording related to the planning activities required in the David Hill Urban Reserve area. So Oregon Land Use Planning Goal 2, which is called Land Use Planning, requires coordination of comprehensive plans prepared by cities, counties, and regional governments. And so the UPAA does just that. It outlines the roles and responsibilities for coordinating comprehensive planning in the Forest Grove area of interest. The Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development also requires an agreement that identifies how comprehensive planning coordination will be implemented within the Portland Regional Urban Growth Boundary. So the UPAA fulfills both of these. So the 2026 update reflects changes to the city boundary since 2018, makes the Washington County Forest Grove UPAA consistent with others in the county, modifies the common boundary between the Forest Grove and Cornelius planning areas. And that's probably the most substantive change, and I'll get into that in more detail. Next slide, please. So the UPAA amendment, next slide, please. There are two. The first one is map amendments. The UPAA is updated to reflect annexation since 2018, removes from the Forest Grove planning area an area that was de-annexed back in 2019 at the property owner's request, and some of you may remember that. The urban growth boundary bisected property, so there was a portion of an area that was inside the city limits but outside the urban growth boundary, and so that was de-annexed from the city area outside. The map amendments also removed from the Forest Grove planning area part of a parcel that is mostly within the Cornelius planning area, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. The area to be removed from the Forest Grove planning area would be added to the Cornelius area. So this slide shows the map from the current 2018 UPAA. It shows the overall urban planning area, the David Hill Urban Reserve area, and the Forest Grove city limits, which is in the lighter gray area. The crosshatched area are areas that were within the city limits with county land use districts. So the map is being updated as part of this amendment to add the areas annexed to the city north of David Hill Road, where David Estates is located, Bailey Meadows, and the Farmstead development. Removing an area that was de-annexed, that's number 2 shown on the map, so that shows the location of that de-annexation area. Number 3 is an amendment to the map to basically exclude areas that are outside of the urban growth boundary, designated rural reserve, and so it makes the UPA, our planning area, consistent with the urban growth boundary. And then number 4 is that Cornelius addition area that I'm. So the Cornelius addition area, there's about 2.6 acres. It's within the Forest Grove planning area, south of Council Creek, right at the Forest Grove Cornelius boundary. The overall parcel is 47 acres in area, of which about 18 acres are within the urban growth boundary. That would be the orange and yellow areas on the map. About 15 acres, the yellow areas, currently in the Cornelius planning area. And so there's a little over 2 acres that are still within the Forest Grove planning area, not all of which is developable. Next slide, please. So the area adjacent to Council Creek, this is near Ewan and First Avenue, is constrained by some slope, 10% slope area, which is shown in the beige area. But more significantly, the area is constrained by floodway and floodplain areas. And there's also a wetland area that's shown. In total, about 1 acre of the 2.6 acres in the Forest Grove planning area would be is what would be developed. Slide, please. So transitioning into the text amendments, the revised UPAA would revise text to clarify required coordination between Washington County and city regarding land use matters. Basically, it's to remove ambiguous wording. The text amendments would also revise wording for clarifying the process for modifying the UPAA moving forward, and then revising wording to state that any changes to the city boundary due to annexation automatically amends the UPAA. So when areas are amended, we don't have to go back through this process. When areas are annexed, we don't have to go back through this process to amend the UPAA. Formally happen. And the revisions will also make the Forest Grove Urban Planning Area Agreement wording consistent with others in the county. So in conclusion, in order for these changes to become fully effective, the amendments must be accepted by the City Council after review by the Planning Commission. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission reviewed the revisions in early March, and that the Planning Commission unanimously recommended that the City Council adopt a resolution accepting the amendments and authorizing the city manager to sign the resolution on the city's behalf. Slide, please. So that's the staff recommendation is that the City Council take the Planning Commission's recommendation and that City Council approve a resolution to endorse the amendments to the 2018 Washington County Forest Grove Urban Planning Area Agreement adopted by the Washington County Board of Commissioners and authorize the city manager to amend the Urban Planning Area Agreement on the city's behalf. So the next step, there is one more step after the UPAA is amended because of that Cornelius addition area. If the City Council does authorize the city manager to sign the UPAA on the city's behalf, staff will return to the City Council, to both the Planning Commission and the City Council with a comprehensive plan map amendment to formally remove the city's comprehensive plan map designation from the territory that would be added to the Cornelius plan, so that there wouldn't be 2 designations on that parcel, both Forest Grove. So that's the staff presentation and staff recommendation. I'd be happy to answer any questions City Council might have about the amendment.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Any questions, comments for Dan? Yes, Councilor Schimmel.
maybe apologize if this is out of place. The Cornelius piece of property, that makes absolute sense. Does the planned Council Creek Trail travel through that specific lot?
No, in that area, the Council Creek Regional Trail would follow the railroad corridor, and so no, it wouldn't affect that.
Counselor Faulkner.
I have a question about what triggers an urbanization. So, what you're referring back to the part of your presentation discussing, the 2018 resolution from the county that, any area to avoid the sort of urbanized areas, unincorporated urbanized areas, that those areas should be incorporated. I'm just sort of curious, are there specific triggering development activities that ensure that would happen? Or I guess I'm just sort of thinking about, like, down the road, what does it mean for this parcel, but also just a little bit bigger picture, if you could just kind of explain.
Well, typically the trigger is where a property owner wants to develop their property, they need urban services, so water, sanitary, sewer. And in order to provide those services, land for urbanization has to be within the urban growth bound. And it wasn't entirely clear if to provide services if they had to come from the city or if the county could provide. And if the county provides it, that's how those situations like North Bethany and some of the other areas develop. Now would have to, in order to get those urban services, would have to come from the city primarily.
Okay, so it's hookup essentially to
a system.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, what is the wish of the council? Anybody?
Move that we accept resolution 2026-12.
So moved.
Okay, resolution 2026-12 was moved by Counselor Martinez and seconded by Counselor Faulkner. Any discussion? Hearing none, will the city manager read it by title only, please?
Resolution 2026-12, adopting amended urban planning area agreement between Washington County and the city of Forest Grove and repealing resolution number 2018-75.
Great, thank you. All those in favor of approving resolution 202612, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, resolution 202612 is approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a 6-0 vote. Thank you very much. And now you're free to leave.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to item G, which is our council communications, and we'll start with our council president.
All right. So, I do not need to present about the library because they did their presentation today. All I ask is that you keep in mind the book sale days. If you would like to volunteer, if you know people that would like to volunteer, your kids perhaps, those are good things to do for the community. Now for the Policy Advisory Board, we met last week. And we had just one important task, which was to approve the annual action plan for 2026. So what this is about is that this action plan is one of two that must be sent to the Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD because they are the ones that give us the funding for us to allocate that funding for home improvement services, etc. So we went through this plan and it was approved. They also have many activities. This is something a little bit different, but important nevertheless, that this week from the 6th through the 10th, last week was the National Community Development Week, and we did read a proclamation on our last meeting to acknowledge this for the Fair Housing Month. Of course, the Washington County also scheduled their proclamations for the 7th last week. And they will be celebrating this. The county will be celebrating this National Community Development Week through different activities. The Fair Housing Council of Oregon, Anywhere But Here exhibit is on display in the Public Services Building, and it will be there until the 15th of April, so just a couple of days left of that exhibition. And it will be at the Civic Center in Hillsborough from April 16th through the 30th. So there is another opportunity to see this exhibit. And there will also be a documentary on, never mind, that was on April 1st, so I guess we missed it, but the documentary is called No Place to Grow Old, because it's all related to housing and allocating funds to help the lesser fortunate of our community to have a place, a roof over their heads. So those are some of the activities that they will be doing. And I wanted just to share with you very quickly something, but it disappeared from my screen. So, okay, so that's all I will share with you at this time.
Thank you, Council President. Councilor Falconer.
HLB, I had a walking tour with Robert, whom you met earlier this evening. We just walked around the downtown historic district. He sort of, pointed out some opportunities and maybe some limitations around, some of the guidelines and standards that we might consider when we see that draft in June. So looking forward to having a bigger discussion with you all about kind of what that ends up looking like. JWC, we meet later this week. Have a report next time. And then Chamber, we had the ribbon cutting at Camila's. It was well attended, and I know a couple of you were also there, and food was delicious.
Very good.
All I got.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Gustin. Councilor Marshall.
Forestry just presented. As far as Parks and Rec, majority of our last meeting was spent discussing parking and what is going to be maintained by Public Works or by the Parks and Rec Committee. And so they spent the lion's share of that meeting doing that. They did mention that the East Side Park will be coming under construction within the next month. Also, there's a cool thing coming up. There's a pop-up at Kyle Park, and a guy named Mountain Bike Robbie will be there. And he's gonna be basically doing classes, and he's gonna have giant airbags that kids can ride their mountain bikes off of jumps into.
When is that?
On May 16th. And you have to sign up on the Forest Grove webpage.
Mountain Bike Robbie?
It's Mountain Bike Robbie. It's what they call him, Coach
That's all
Robbie,
my
but
neighbor.
he's listed as Coach Robbie, but everybody refers to him as Mountain Bike Robbie.
I love it. Okay.
So I've
Where do
talked
you
to-
sign up at?
What's that?
Where do you sign up at?
on the Forest Grove website.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's
Not for me, not for me.
Yeah, it's gonna be. They're looking for volunteers for it too. So we did mention it to NHS about doing it, and so we mentioned it to the liaison for the high school to see if they can get kids to do that. But yeah, he's gonna go with some trail design kind of things, kind of give an idea to the community what the design is going to be like for Kyle Park.
Perfect.
And that was about all we got from that one.
Exciting. Thank you, Councilor Marshall. And Councilor Martinez.
So, Rural Fire Department, it was mostly going over their budget for the last meeting. And then they're putting up their reader board that they've ordered. So they're excited about that. They're at Gills Creek. And then for Sister City Committee, they're proceeding with the 501c3 documentation. And she had a rough draft at the last meeting that they read through and made whatever changes were necessary. And then, at some time in the next couple months or so, they will be requesting to come before the council with their request.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Counselor. And then Counselor Schimmel.
No meetings to report, but related to the TV Highway Transit Project, the TriMet CEO accepted an invitation to come out this Friday with his project managers for I'd call a street level orientation on the challenges on TV Highway in our corridor. And I'm hoping Jesse or Kim, someone from staff, can participate. Something that was just conjured up in my memory is authorizing Greg to study turning Pacific into a two-way, which would affect their plans through our corridor, at least from the B Street to Maple. So maybe we'd talk offline about that in particular and what message we would want to convey to them as far as the timing of our study on that. But it was encouraging that the CEO, who's like I reported last time, TriMet just took over the project management. So for them to come out and walk the corridor with us was encouraging.
Great. Thank you, Counselor Schimmel. And then I'll turn it over to our city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just a couple things. Internally, it's been just lots of budget meetings. We're preparing for the May 12th budget meeting. It is our goal, an aspirational goal, to have one budget committee meeting this year on May 12th. Generally, the budget message is going to center on kind of any mid-biennial reconciliation or adjustments that may need to be made. So if it's outside of the parameters of either year one or year two, we'll of course bring it to the council's attention. Then anything that may have been unforeseen, changes in operations, etc. So kind of a mid-biennial report, if you will. A couple other things. Councilor Marshall also mentioned the East Side Park. I would just add that the master plan is currently out for RFP, and we're receiving proposals for that. So look for more information on the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan. We had a meeting with CFM, our Federal Affairs consultants, the Public Works Director, Greg Robertson, and I on Friday. We are looking at two different grants. One is called the Building Resilience Infrastructure Improvement Grant, or the BRIC grant. The other one is the Safe Streets for All grant. One of the grants was previously delayed. It's now back online. Those grants we're looking at applying for the BRIC grant. That would be for the water reservoir project that's in the Water Master Plan up on Watercrest. And the other one would be for East TV Highway. That would be the Safe Streets for All grant. So those are both in progress, and we're planning with CFM on applications for both of those. On the Public Works note, the new portion of the Public Works building is nearly complete. So what will happen now is the staff will move into the newer portion, and the contractors will go in and remodel the old portion of the building, or the northern portion of the building. If you haven't had a chance to drive by, please do so. The project is coming along quite nicely, and when it is all said and done, sometime this summer, probably in August, September, then we will look at having some kind of ribbon cutting with the council. And then last, I previously reported on this, the Housing Authority of Washington County issued a RFP for 60 units of permanent supportive housing on 3127 Pacific Avenue. The submittal deadline was at the end of March. Those proposals are being considered. Once a designer and a contractor is selected, I'll report further to the council. Other than that, that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Speaking of CFM, our federal consultants, I would just like to, recognize and give a shout out to Michael Skipper. When we took the MEAC group to DC, he arranged a meeting with Congresswoman Bonamici, and so the students had a half an hour in her office. They each got to ask a question. Her staff came in multiple times, like, "Hey, you have another meeting," but she was really gracious, and that was facilitated through CFM, and so I just want to give them another shout out. And I don't want to speak, so I don't want to jinx it, but I think we're working on getting some funding for TV Highway and also the Festival Street. So more to come on that. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of city staff, but specifically to Joyce and Stephanie. We have not met since the State of the City, and they just work really well. They put on a great event, and thank you to all of you for participating in the event. The MYAC, Luke Thompson, the Head Choppers bringing the hype, the energy, Theater in the Grove for hosting it. I just think that, I don't know, I mean, I just thought it was like such a good, like, it had a really good vibe, right? About how we all come together. And it takes a lot of us in this community, but when we show up for each other, we have good results. And I think was really done well. I'm not going to report too much about the DC trip with the MYAC because the MYAC students are scheduled to present at our next council meeting, and I'm going to let them do their job. Okay, so then Region 1 transportation. Oh my goodness. Okay, so CIP funding, we were asked earlier last month to send our top 5 projects. And the group voted, it's I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement, which never got funded through House Bill 2017. Then TV Highway Investment for the Bus Rapid Transit Project, the BRT. And then Sunrise Corridor Phase 2, Expressway 205 to 192nd, and Historic Columbia River Highway, Street Trail Completion, and Arterial Safety Investments. Those are the projects we sent. And then we had another meeting. We've actually had 2 meetings, and I don't feel like we've gotten anything done. But they wanted 5 additional projects, but they want specific projects as a backup. And we had kind of had buckets, or no, maybe they wanted, no. And initially they had asked us for buckets. So we had some like safety. So like, for example, well, I don't want to all my notes, but I had said paving projects, bridge paving, or safety projects, jurisdictional transfers, and paving were the 3 that I would add as our like in the queue. But then some of the criteria changed with ODOT. After a 2-hour meeting, we really didn't have anything. And apparently ODOT's going to give us to the end of the month. This is supposed to be like a quarterly meeting. And I've met with Region 1 Transportation like 3 times in the last month and don't think anything's really come out of it. So hopefully we get that squared away. I met with Washington County Coordinating Committee today, and we allocated some MISTIP funding for Tigard for some grants, Safe Route to School grants. And then also had a presentation. Metro's doing a visioning project. Is anyone, it was one of those things that I had a question, but my class was going to start, so I had to drop the Zoom meeting. But they're doing a visioning for Metro. And I know Mayor Pace from Hillsborough is on it, but I was wondering, is anyone from Forest Grove like representing that our rural kind of very west side of Metro on that visioning? They said there was 22 people, but some had dropped out. And I really wanted to ask the question, but Jess wasn't done presenting, so I didn't really have the opportunity. I'm just wondering, do you know about that?
So I have heard about the project, and I believe that we do have a staff member that is involved, but let me double check on that, Mayor.
Yeah,
So.
I just want to make sure that I think that it's important for Forest Grove to be represented either by staff or by elected. We got an update from TriMet about their service cuts. They did based on community engagement, they revised a little bit. So they're going to merge line 58 and 19. That's in the Gleason line area, because if they initially did the line 19 cut, there's access to a medical facility would no longer exist. And then in the Tualatin Sherwood employment area, they're going to retain 97 and merge it with 38. So there's still going to be more cuts coming from TriMet. Their goal is a balanced budget in 3 years. So look for more cuts on that. We did have consensus earlier this year, actually probably in 2025, about our second council meeting of the month, having a conversation or a work session on immigration. So I was going to propose that the work session on the 27th be about the immigration bills, and just see how they align, or if we need to update our sanctuary city code, or also have a discussion. I think Multnomah County just did this, and I think Hillsborough, says ICE can't stage on city property, so I don't know if that's something we want to look at as well. But I don't know if, while I'm finishing up my mayor's report, if any of y'all have ideas about that immigration work session, I'm open to suggestions. Mayor Wilson from Portland came to the Washington County Board requesting for funds for, and, you know, just so you know, I did get a hold of our District 4 rep and the chair and said, hey, I'm not in support of that. We have needs in Washington County, and fortunately, it was unanimously they voted him. They said no. So that's some good news. So I'm going to end my mayor comments with some very sad news. Mrs. Truax, Pat Truax, passed away on Saturday evening. I mean, there's lots of things I think that in time I'll be able to say about Pat, but I think for over 57 years, she showed up every day for this community as a teacher, as a volunteer, a founding member of the Public Arts Commission. It's a huge loss. It's a huge loss for our community. Even last week, Saturday, when I went to visit her and she was on hospice, as soon as I came in, she reminded me that I'm speaking at the PEO. She had Pete get me the address for the PEO, and she told me, Melinda, that's a service group you should volunteer with. And so not only did she serve our community really well, she brought others up with her. She taught us all how to give back to the community, what it means to be a community member, and consistently always encouraged us and everybody to do that. And so Forest Grove is definitely a better community because of her. And I know that I don't think I would be in the seat without her. So my condolences go out to Pete and John and James, Lori, her granddaughters, Sydney and Aaron, and her friends who are like her family. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.